Hello everyone and welcome to my 2020 recap of Ethereum. In this video, I'm going to recap the entire year in the Ethereum space and the wider crypto space as a whole. I'm going to focus on the major events that happened, the things that really defined 2020. A lot of it, I even forgot as I was getting the content together for this video, so I think this video is going to be quite interesting. You're going to be reminded of a lot of things that you've probably haven't thought about in a few months that were actually quite impactful at the time. I'm going to start, from January. I'm going to go all the way through to December, focusing on the biggest events that happened in each of those months. And there is a lot to go through. I put all the content together over the last couple days, and there's just so much. I unfortunately am going to miss a lot of things because I can't focus on everything. There's just too much to go through. So I tried to pick out, I guess, like the biggest things that I saw kind of happening within the space at the time. And I kind of tried to remember back to if people were talking about it at the time as well. I think that's really important. Whatever got the community kind of like riled up, basically. And there were a few major events through 2020, of course. The biggest obviously being DeFi Summer and ETH2, but there are a bunch of other things as well that I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to be going through this. I don't know how long this video is going to be. It's probably going to be a couple hours long. I'm recording this basically live. I've got all the content in front of me. So I guess without further ado, let's get right into it. So I guess the way I wanted to start this video was basically focusing on kind of the returns that ETH saw for the year. So not only did the Ethereum network have such an amazing year, right? ETH did as well. So you can see here that ETH finished up about 460% on the year. And you can see, the growth has been incredible, right? I think my camera's blocking off there, but you can see basically we started 2020 like quite positively. We went up into basically over here, and then obviously we had the coronavirus uncertainty hit and we dumped down from there. And then we marched back up basically to July, and then we've just continued up since then, as you can see here, which has just been absolutely incredible. And ETH had a pretty poor 2019. It basically finished up maybe 2% on the year, I think it was, while Bitcoin had a pretty incredible 2019 compared to ETH. So yeah, it's really great to see ETH putting in a lot of effort this year, and it's reflecting, I think, a lot of the work that the Ethereum ecosystem has done to get DeFi to where it is, to get ETH2 to where it is, and all that sort of stuff. So really, really great to see that. So yeah, I just wanted to call that out because I think that 2020 finished strong for ETH, and I think ETH's going to have a very strong 2021 as well. But yeah, so let's jump into everything that happened within the crypto space. So we kicked off 2020 with an SEC action against Telegram and their ICO. For those who don't know, Telegram basically did like a massive ICO. I think it was like a couple $1 billion worth or something like that. Not as big as EOS, of course, but a pretty big ICO. And they managed to raise money from a bunch of like big money players, and people, they kind of did this last year, I think, or maybe the year before, that people were like, this is crazy, right? Why is Telegram doing this? And they were going to do it to have a token for their platform, a native token. And then they came out with like Telegram blockchain and things like that. And people were like, this just makes no sense. We've already been through the kind of like Ethereum killer kind of story. It doesn't really make sense. EOS raised all this money and didn't get much adoption. So why is Telegram doing this? And then after that, Telegram basically had a lot of issues with not only the SEC, but other regulatory bodies. Telegram in general comes under fire from governments as well, I think. So yeah, that's how we basically started off 2020 with an SEC action against Telegram here. You can see here, they did a $1.7 billion ICO. And, that's just crazy. I think that's the second biggest ICO after EOS, if I'm thinking. Yeah, it definitely is. So yeah, they were basically ordered by a judge to explain why it should not have to turn over their financials concerning their ICO, basically. So yeah, I think there was a few more actions throughout the year. Maybe I'll bring them up throughout the video. But yeah, that's kind of how we kicked off 2020. Oh, got to reload here. I got so many tabs open that I think my Chrome is not liking me right now. Okay, so yeah, I guess Ethereum. So this was before the SEC action, I think, and obviously this is relevant to Ethereum. So Mura Glacier was basically this hard fork for Ethereum that went in. It was unscheduled. And the reason why this hard fork happened was because of the difficulty bomb activated activated earlier than people thought it would, which means that the block times got longer. And if we didn't diffuse the difficulty bomb, the Ethereum block times would have just kept getting longer and longer and longer, and the network would have basically grinded to a halt. Now, for those of you who don't know what I guess the difficulty bomb is within Ethereum, it's basically a mechanism that was put in place from the early days to, force the protocol to not basically ossify. And what I mean by that is basically to force it to not become Bitcoin, like where upgrades rarely happen. There's never really hard forks or anything like that to upgrade the network. So that's why it was kind of put in. I think, at this point, it's kind of redundant. I think, this hard fork, I'm pretty sure pushed it back like 2 years. Almost 2 years, 611 days. And I think that's coming up soon in the next few months or something that'll be up for renewal again. But yeah, so this hard fork basically went through because it needed to. Like there was no, like if we didn't do this hard fork, the Ethereum network would have kind of grinded to a halt, which is unfortunate there. But yeah, basically really, I guess like that was January 2nd, right? It's like the start of the year. And this was kind of like, I guess the, there's a lot of FUD around this because people are like, oh, the Ethereum developers forgot about the Ice Age, they call it, or the difficulty bomb. Now they're trying to rush through a hard fork, whatever. And, I guess like I say it's FUD, but there is some kind of like credence to that or kind of like credibility to that because I think people did forget about it. I mean, Eric Connor was the one who pointed this out because he noticed that the block times were ticking up. And that was a failure on, I guess, like that, not the developers, but like the whole ecosystem for not noticing this thing. But in general, it's something that's not talked about, right? When's the last time you heard someone talk about the difficulty bomb on Ethereum? It's hardly a thing that people think about because it's just such a redundant thing now that I think we should just remove it at this point. And I think, it's not going to be an ETH2 or anything like that. So sooner or later, it's going to become this kind of irrelevant thing. So I guess we'll see how it kind of pans out from there. But yeah, we started off the year in Ethereum with that, which unfortunately wasn't like the most bullish thing to happen, especially after the 2019 that Ethereum had. It was quite, an interesting start to the year. All right, next up, we had the NBA player Spencer Dinwiddie rolling out his tokenized investment platform at the beginning of the year, beginning of 2020. So some of you might remember this. Basically, this was quite big news at the time that he was kind of like tokenizing his, I guess, like salary on Ethereum. Basically, and you can see here, it was basically a bond. So it was the first bond being managed by a digital transfer agent operating on the Ethereum blockchain. So this kind of like, there was a lot of drama around this throughout the year. I think the NBA ended up blocking him from doing this or limiting him to what he could do. There was obviously a lot of concerns around securities regulations and things like that around this. But at the time, people were getting really excited, right? Because they're like, here's this mainstream kind of platform like the NBA and a player within the NBA embracing Ethereum. It's going to bring so many new people in, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was exciting, but it kind of didn't really go anywhere. I mean, I think the last update I saw was that some NBA player was accepting Bitcoin over Lightning Network or something. I mean, at this point, it's just like very gimmicky. I think there's not really much to these things. Like, yeah, it's cool, it's exciting, it's like pioneering, but I think that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really do much. I think that, the narrative is fine, the story's cool, but it's basically a thing where you think about it for a few days or maybe even just a couple days and you kind of get over it. So yeah, but that was pretty big news at the time, at the beginning of this year. And I think maybe it even happened last year because there's just been so much drama around this. I've just heard about it on and off. But yeah, I guess that was pretty big news at the start of the year. Next up, I mean, I think this is probably one of the biggest pieces of news from the year was that Virgil Griffith, the, I guess, Ethereum researcher that works at the Ethereum Foundation, was formally indicted in the North Korean case. So basically, for those who don't know, Virgil went to North Korea and he basically is kind of charged with educating North Korean officials on how to use Ethereum and cryptocurrencies to evade sanctions. That's basically the gist of it. Now, I mean, I've spoken about this before. I think that the US is kind of overreaching here. I think that all that information that Virgil kind of, even if he did teach them or whatever about this. All that information is freely available anyway, so it's not like he was giving them privileged information. And on top of that, I personally, I know Virgil. I know people who are really good friends with him as well. I don't think he was going there with the intention of educating North Korean officials to evade sanctions or anything like that. But, this kind of caused a stir in the community for sure. Virgil's a long-time Ethereum community member. And, outside of that, people were like, this was really stupid of him to do, really dumb for him to go to North Korea in the first place. And yeah, totally, I agree with that. It was really dumb for him to do this. And obviously he's paying the consequences now. But at the same time, I think that, we recently got an update that he's got like a court date this year. I think September or something like that. So we'll kind of see what happens there. The person who's representing him as his lawyer is the person who represented EOS against the SEC and got them a slap on the wrist, basically. So he's got a pretty good lawyer representing him, but I guess we won't know the results of this for quite a while still. So, it's sad. He'll probably end up spending like $2 million under arrest where he kind of, $2 million. He'll probably end up spending 2 years under like kind of this house arrest, I think, or not being able to access technology, not being able to do anything. And it's really sad. So I hope we see some better news out of this year, because yeah, 2020 was not good for Virgil Griffith, unfortunately. Next up, we had a major release of ETH2 at the start of the year. So basically, ETH2 had a really, really big year in general, but this was released on the 11th of January 2020. And this basically, I guess, was like cleaning up the ETH2 kind of specs, making sure that everyone kind of was on the same page, getting Phase 0 Beacon Chain to a stable state. And this was, I guess, basically for developers mainly. But what it ended up doing was, I think it signaled that, we're going to coordinate ETH2 properly. We're going to get our shit together. We're going to bring in all this stuff so that people are on the same page, and so that it's not really confusing anymore. Because throughout 2018 and 2019, it was a lot of there was a lot of confusion around ETH2 still. There's a lot of disparate efforts going on, and we kind of needed to bring that all together. And that's what Danny Ryan basically did this year. He brought it all together. He coordinated the effort, and he got it to mainnet. And Danny Ryan was the one who released this DJ2. Basically. So yeah, that was really big news, because that was kind of like the signal that we're making ETH2 happen this year. In 2020, sorry, it's 2021 now. So yeah, that was quite big news at the time. So I just wanted to call that one out. Aztec. So I haven't heard from Aztec in a few months now, but they did have a big kind of like year as well. So for those who don't know, Aztec is a privacy protocol, and what they ended up doing in January was finishing their trusted setup, and it was the largest one in history at the time. I participated in this. It was really cool. This is basically setting up the network to be able to kind of like, I guess, function essentially. I'm not going to go into the technical details, but this was pretty big news at the time. You basically got to be part of this ceremony if you participated, and you got a t-shirt as well, which I still have somewhere, for participating, which was really, really cool. But yeah, this was huge news at the time. I think I was one of the only people from Australia to do this as well, because there was like a global map you could see, and you could see where everyone was in the world and stuff like that. So yeah, there were over 202 participants, of which 176 were valid. So that was like the biggest at the time. You had 30 participants staying incognito, which is really cool. Participants from 105 cities across 41 countries. So yeah, there was a lot of participation here, and at the time it was pretty big news. So yeah, really, really cool to see that. But I haven't seen much out of Aztec lately. I think maybe they're working on some protocol improvements and things like that. So hoping to hear more from them in 2021. So this might come as a shock to some of you, but Aave didn't go live until 2020. So Aave had been around since 2017, and it used to be called ETHLend. But their protocol, I don't think, was live in any kind of like mainnet capacity. It didn't really do anything. They had done an ICO, they raised money, they were building it out. But yeah, Aave protocol went live January 2020. And you can see if you look at their total value lock chart, there was like hardly anything in there at the time. And now it's over 2 billion. So if I had to say, besides Uniswap, the other project that had an amazing 2020 was Aave. They just grew so much, right? Not only their platform, but their token as well. Their token price had just been butchered after the 2017 bull market and bear market, right? It was like trading at only a $5 million cap, like I think early in 2019. And then it's like over $1 billion market cap now. So Aave had, yeah, just an incredible year. And, you know, at the time, I think that Compound was the only money market live. So Aave came in and they were challenging like Compound essentially. And they basically managed to overtake them a few times in 2020. So that was really cool. But yeah, I guess a lot of people aren't aware that Aave went live in 2020. They probably assume that it's been around for quite a while. Nope, they did all their growth in 2020, which is just the more impressive, right? They've only been on mainnet for a year and they're already a top DeFi protocol, you know, by far. Not just in terms of total value lock, not in terms of token price, but feature set, right? Trust, brand, reputation, just insane. So, you know, big congratulations to Stani and his team on this. It's just, yeah, just incredible what they've managed to kind of, I guess, accomplish within just 1 year on mainnet. Optimism. So you've probably heard a lot about Optimism lately. I spoke about them on the Daily Way Refuel yesterday, or I guess like the latest one I did. So basically, Optimism came out of Plasma Group. So before they were called Optimism, they were called Plasma Group. This was basically an announcement that they had evolved into, I guess, this new group that was focusing on optimistic rollup technology, which is a scaling technology for Ethereum. So they go on, I guess this was posted January 16th, 2020. So they go on to say, you know, why they're excited about optimistic rollup, why it's going to be amazing, right? What they're going to be doing with it and stuff like that. It was a short update here, but this was kind of like big news at the time because Plasma Group had been known for a lot of their scalability work that they had been doing with Plasma. And then I think towards the end of 2019, optimistic rollups were heating up and people were like, what's this rollup technology, right? You know, ZK rollups as well. Like, what is this? This looks really awesome. This is really promising. And of course, you know, 2020 was another year where all that technology kind of came to mainnet. And we've got like mainnet implementations using rollups now, and it kind of seems like that's going to be the technology that takes Ethereum to the next level, right? And scales it out essentially. So yeah, really cool to see. I mean, Optimism had a big 2020 as well. I think 2021 is going to be an even bigger year for them as they bring their technology to mainnet. People can actually use it, right, for real value transfer and things like that. So yeah, really cool to see that. In terms of Set news, so the company I work for, we launched Set Social Trading in January of 2020, which was the first DeFi social trading platform, ever. You know, for those who don't know, eToro has a social trading platform. It's basically a way to copy traders. So you basically say, okay, whenever this trader makes a trade, I want to make a trade, the same trade that follows them. And that's kind of what we did with Set Social Trading. So we had a bunch of people on board pioneering the social trading platform, which is really cool. We had some really great growth there. It was a monumental effort at the time to get these traders, to vet them, to make sure that they were experienced and legit traders and things like that. So yeah, it was really cool to kind of launch that at the beginning of the year, and that kind of like carried through the rest of the year. It was really, really cool. So yeah, we had that launch in January, and then since then, Set's evolved a lot, which I'll talk about a little bit later, I think. But yeah, that was really cool to see go live in January of 2020. So this is funny because this was posted on January 31st, 2020, and it was the CFTC chairman reiterating his beliefs that ETH futures will be launched. Now, obviously, it was announced a couple of weeks ago that ETH futures will be launched in February of 2021. So this was really great foresight here from Heath Tarbert here. And when he said this, people were expecting it to come a lot sooner than it did. But, you know, we all know that the traditional system moves a lot slower than we would like, but it's just funny to look back and see that he actually said this in January of 2020, and it took almost a year for it to be announced. So that was really cool. And actually, he goes on to say here that he believes the futures tied to Ether could trade in the next 6 to 12 months. So I guess he was off by 1 month, or not even 1 month, like a week, because technically they're going live in February, I think February 8th or something like that. So he was off only by about a week, which is really, really cool. So obviously he has privileged information here, I think, where he's across and privy to, you know, different things happening in this space, but really cool to see that came to life. Here we go. Yeah, Aztec, as I was just talking about. So January, they had their setup, I guess like their trusted setup ceremony, which was to get them to mainnet, and then they launched on February 1st, basically. And, you know, what you could do with Aztec at the time was you could wrap DAI in a zero knowledge proof, and make it private DAI. So you could send kind of DAI to people, and the amount that was being sent was hidden. So if I sent you 1,000 DAI, it would actually come up as like, I think 10 DAI or something, and that was just like a static unit. So no one would know that I was sending you 1,000 DAI, and you wouldn't know that they wouldn't know that you're sending me 1,000 DAI or whatever, something like that. So yeah, Aztec ended up going live February 1st. But as I said, haven't heard much from them lately. Hoping to hear more as we go forward. Maple was announced in February of 2020. So most of you probably haven't heard of this project. And a disclaimer here, I am an investor in Maple. They are born out of Melbourne, the city I live in Australia. So know the guys really well. But they recently also announced that they had raised the seed round too. But they actually announced their platform and what they were building in February of 2020. And they've kind of been building towards it all year. So basically what Maple Loans is, or what the Maple platform kind of is that it's like basically a way for people to form communities to borrow and lend under collateralized loans. So I think that under collateralized loans is going to be a big thing going into 2021. You know, no one wants to have to put up like 150% collateral to borrow, 100% to borrow less assets than they put up, right? You want to have more value for your money. You want to be able to have a reputation where you're like, okay, I want to borrow this money on my assets, but I want to make the most out of it. I don't want to have to borrow like such a little amount and risk getting liquidated because I have to keep such a high collateralization ratio, all this sort of stuff. So I think Maple is going to be a big player in that space in 2021. But yeah, they announced all the way back in February 2020, which actually, when I was going through this, I was like, oh wow, that is quite a while ago, because I actually met with them. I think in 2019, I met with them. I was still at my old job before Set. So I had met with them in 2019, I think in early 2019. And I kind of just kind of gave them advice about where I saw DeFi going and what was happening. I remember at the time talking about there was not much going on. There was Compound, I think, in Dharma and Uniswap, basically. 2019 feels like a different world now in DeFi. But yeah, I remember that conversation. But yeah, cool to see that. I guess this was announced almost a year ago now, and hopefully they'll be going live really soon. So a bit of sad news, I guess, during 2020 as well, that people may have forgotten about. Consensus started laying off people. So in February of 2020, they cut 14% of their staff as they geared up to raise more money. Now, this wasn't the only cut that happened, and I think I'm going to talk about the other ones later. But basically, this was a pretty big hit at the time. And this came out of the fact that ETH was, I think... So for those who don't know, I'll give some backstory here before I go into it. Joe Lubin, obviously a very early ETH investor, was considered a co-founder of Ethereum, or is considered a co-founder of Ethereum. He funds a lot of Consensus through his own pockets, through his own ETH holdings. Now, obviously, when the ETH price is lower, he can't fund it as much as he would like. So he began cutting staff in 2020 because Ethereum's price had been brutalized in 2019. It was, still hovering around $150 at the time or something like that. So it was definitely not where he could, have more staff on. So he started cutting staff. And I think that's actually, I feel sorry for the people who lost their jobs, but at the time, I thought it was actually pretty good because Consensus needed to get leaner. I think they had over 1,000 employees. They definitely needed to get leaner as an organization, focus on their winners like MetaMask, Infura, Truffle Suite, things like that. Rather than a lot of the moonshots bets they were making and things like that. So yeah, I think it was healthy at the time. But over the last few months, I haven't heard anything about further layoffs. And I think that's in part due to the fact that ETH's price is going up, which helps a lot with funding Consensus and things like that. So yeah, but at the time, this was sobering news as obviously whenever people are losing jobs in the Ethereum ecosystem, the whole ecosystem feels it because it's a very, very tight-knit kind of place. But I think that, there's so much opportunity now for people to work within Ethereum and within crypto that these people would have found other jobs. I'm sure of it. Oop, let this refresh. So Pool Together raised their first, round, $1.05 million in February of 2020. It was led by IDEO VC, so IDEO Collab Ventures, those of you who probably know of them, with participation from Consensus Labs and Doggy Tail Capital, or DTC Capital here. So at the time, pulled together was, I mean, people were talking about it at the time and they're like, this is going to be huge, right? This is like a no-loss lottery where people can go into this and basically, put in some money, and then the interest earned on that money is the prize, and then they can withdraw their money at the end of it. It's not going to be like it's a lottery where you put in your money and then if you don't win, you lose it all. So that was kind of a big kind of narrative at the start. Pulled Together had like a pretty good year. I think they launched like V2. They raised more money. I think I might go into that later. But basically, I think this is one of the apps that brings in the mainstream. If we can scale it, if we can get it kind of like into the mainstream consciousness. Pulled Together wants to be a savings vehicle as well, where you can encourage people to put their money into this, and basically it's saving their money technically, right? And then also they go into the running of basically winning a prize. You can think of this like a bank account, right? Imagine if you put your money into a bank account and then there was like a prize that got given out to people every few weeks or something from the bank, and basically and that would come out of the money that they made on your money. Because for those who don't know, when you put your money in a bank account, it doesn't just sit there. The bank uses that money to make investments, to loan out, especially to mortgages and things like that, all this sort of stuff, to make more money for themselves. And that's how they can pay you an interest rate, even though the interest rates are very low right now. It'd be really cool, if a bank did that, but they don't do that, and they probably will never do that. But Pulled Together does. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. But yeah, they raised that money, and they actually raised more money recently, which I might go into a bit later. So MStable was announced in February of 2020 as well. Again, and I'm an investor in MStable and an advisor to them as well. So a disclaimer there. That basically what MStable is, it's a stablecoin platform similar, I guess, to Curve, where you can swap in and out of stablecoins. MStable produces a meta stablecoin called MUSD, which is backed up by a bunch of other underlying stablecoins. So the theory is that the MUSD is stronger than its parts. So it's as strong as the sum of its parts, basically. So yeah, that was announced in February. It didn't hit mainnet till later, but yeah, announced a long time ago. And then I think it started, like, I invested first in January of 2019, so it's been out for quite a while now, and they've seen some good traction so far. The stablecoin space is obviously heating up a lot as well, so really great to see them going live and making moves there. So Open V1, I think it was, yeah, went live on mainnet in February of 2020 as well. They started off with protecting your compound finance deposits against technical and financial risks. A lot of people actually think of these options platforms not just as pure, like, I guess, financial tools to bet on certain things, but they can also be used for hedging your financial and technical risks as kind of like an insurance platform, I guess you could call it, or a coverage platform, sort of similar to Nexus Mutual. And I think that's what a lot of people aren't using this as just yet, but as more of these kind of like options come online to basically hedge your risk, hedge your technical and financial exposure to different things, we're going to see more use of this. And I've said on the Daily Way Refuels that I think that the options platforms are going to be extremely hot in 2021. I know of like 15 plus like projects at this point. It's insane. And I think that there's going to be only a couple of big winners, like in terms of like really big winners, and it's going to be very hard to pick which ones win. It might end up being the case where the ones that win don't even kind of like look like an options platform. They just give people the best products to use to do what they need to do, basically. So yeah, I think that this was really cool. Open had a pretty good year as well, but now they're facing a lot of competition. So we're going to see what happens there. So Ethereum was quite, I mean, they went live in February of 2020. It was quite a big deal within 2020, but I don't think they have managed to kind of grab too much adoption away from MetaMask at this point. So for those who don't know, Ethereum is kind of a wallet that basically allows you to have like a smart wallet where it's, secured with, like, sort of similar to Argent, where you can have like account limits, and it's like a smart contract wallet, and you can do kind of a bunch of different things with it. I mean, if I was to click through to here, I'm sure they've got like a bunch of examples of what you can do with it. Basically, there's integrations with different apps here. They also announced that they raised a seed round of $1.1 million. And yeah, I'm pretty sure they added all these features throughout 2020. So like batching transactions, fiat on and off ramps, an Ethereum native app, things like that. So yeah, that went live at the beginning of 2020. Haven't heard much from them, as I said, recently. I guess because there's been so much noise within DeFi, a lot of these projects are finding it hard to get, public exposure at this point in time. But I still think that, like, from what I know, Ethereum is kind of chipping away, working away, trying to get more adoption on their wallets. I think the wallet space is also pretty crowded right now. As much as I think that MetaMask could be improved 1,000 times, it's just so sticky, and so many people still use MetaMask. So I guess, like, we'll see what wallets win in 2021. So Synthetics added Ether collateral at the beginning of this year to the Synthetics platform. So before that, it was just SNX as collateral, so their native token. But then, obviously people were, asking, okay, when are you going to have other collateral? And obviously the next best collateral was Ether, or I guess, like, you could argue Ether's better collateral than SNX to a point. So they basically launched this in a kind of like limited, they limited the collateral that could be used. I think 1,500 ETH was what they started with, and they had to lower that. And then they kind of like raised it from there. I'm not sure what it is at this point. I think it's a lot more than that. But yeah, so this was really great to see. I think that before this, there was a lot of people going on about risk associated with Synthetics because of the fact that it was kind of like a self-referential system where that you'd use SNX as collateral to back up the synth assets, and then that collateral would basically, if it was to go like full very quickly, then the entire system would become under-collateralized, very quickly, and that would lead to losses and liquidations, blah, 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 blah. But, the collateralization ratio, I think at the start was like 750%. So you had to put up 750% worth of SNX to borrow, at minimum, a very small amount against that. So yeah, really great to see them put ETH collateral in. I'm not sure if they're going to add other collateral to the system. Maybe they will, like tokenized Bitcoin, things like that. We'll have to see as 2021 goes on. So Loopring launched their first ZK rollup exchange in February 2020. I think this was the first layer 2 implementation in DeFi, I think, on mainnet at least. So yeah, and Loopring had a really big year as well because of this, right? This is basically using, as I mentioned before, rollup technology, but not optimistic rollups, ZK rollups, which is different. There's a lot of debate about what's good, what's better, basically, ZK rollups or optimistic rollups. But yeah, this went live in February of 2020. It's gotten a lot of usage since then. I think their usage has skyrocketed lately, 40 million locked or something like that, which is more than a lot of, layer 1 protocols, which is really cool to see. So I think, they released a bunch of other products as well. What I think they're going to have a good year in 2021 too. Compound governance. So this was announced by Compound CEO Robert Leshner on February of 2020. So they announced that they were basically going to have like a decentralized governance process. They were going to have a token. They hadn't released it yet. They just announced it, and they kind of put in I guess like a beta version of their governance process where people could delegate comp IOU tokens or like fake comp tokens to different protocol politicians, and then they would be able to test the governance process. So yeah, that was announced as early as February 2020, and as we all know, comp went live I think June of 2020, but I'll talk about that when we get to that one. So another big kind of thing that happened within 2021 and bled into 2022 was ProgPower. You probably haven't heard about this for quite a while, but ProgPower was something that dominated the Ethereum community's consciousness all throughout 2019, I think, and some of 2018 even. So for those who don't know, ProgPower stands for Programmatic Proof of Work. It was basically this EIP that people proposed that would upgrade or change Ethereum's proof of work algorithm in order to be ASIC resistant, right? And this obviously caused a lot of drama within the community for those who were around. There was a lot of disagreements. The arguments and debates went on for ages. But I think this post from Hudson Jameson here basically put this to bed. Now, this wasn't Hudson, being the dictator here and saying, ProgPower's dead, whatever, we're not going to do it. This just was basically summarizing the history of it, everything that kind of happened, all the debates, all the fors and against and things like that. And giving, basically, I think Hudson gave his own opinion that he thought that that ProgPower wasn't going to happen based on the fact that there was so much community kind of like support around this not happening. and then yeah, he gave his personal perspective here, and he was talking in speaking in a personal perspective. He wasn't speaking on behalf of the Ethereum Foundation or anything like that. So yeah, I think this is the post that kind of put ProgPower to bed, basically killed it, because it summarized everything really nicely and it showed everyone that there was not community consensus here. But yeah, there was a time where people were like, you know, ProgPower is going to go through. We're confident it's going to go through. So it didn't, and I haven't heard anything about it for quite a while. I think the people who wanted it to go through have kind of given up at this point, and I think we're all just focused on getting to ETH2, getting rid of proof of work entirely, moving fully to proof of stake, getting that merger done between ETH1 and ETH2, and forgetting about, you know, ProgPower and everything got to do with mining, I guess, on Ethereum. Another big piece of news that wasn't within the Ethereum community, but I guess like had some ramifications for Ethereum, was that Tron and Justin Sun specifically took over the Steem network. So Steem, I think, as a platform was sold to Tron, and then what ended up happening was there was a hostile takeover where the blockchain of Steem was overtaken by Tron. They kind of were able to get most of the delegated proof of stake nodes to them. So they essentially controlled the network, and that was kind of like quite a big deal at the time. There was a lot of talk about what this means for DeFi protocols, right? And if there can be hostile governance takeovers for DeFi protocols, and I think there actually can be. I think for sure, 100% there can be, because if you have enough power if there's on-chain voting with tokens, and you can basically, you know, you have something that you want to do or something you want to implement on that platform, you can do it if you have enough tokens, and you can make your, you know, exert your will essentially. So that's why this was kind of like a very hot topic at the time. And the Steem community was actually quite large. You know, outside of Ethereum, I think the Steem community is one of the biggest ones in crypto, and they fought back. They forked it off. They created a new community. I can't remember what it's called now, but they created a new token, a new community called Hive. That's right, it's called Hive, to basically fight back against Justin Sun. And I think Binance got caught up in this as well. They were like supporting Justin Sun's takeover here. But then CZ said, oh, you know, we don't get involved in these politics. We're just supporting what the community wants. And it was a pretty big, like, you know, like a lot of drama. I would say that for the Steem community, this was their version of ProgPower in terms of how much drama was kind of going on here. So yeah, that was a big piece of news in March. Also in March, Zora was introduced. So you've probably seen Zora on Twitter a lot, where people are tweeting a moon face, kind of like a happy moon face. Sorry, a crescent moon, a happy moon face, another crescent moon together. Basically, that's like signaling to Zora that they want to be a part of like the beta testing. So what Zora is, it's basically a marketplace to buy, sell, and trade limited edition goods, aka NFTs. And obviously we all know that NFTs had a pretty breakout year within 2020 as well. But Zora is one of these platforms that are kind of, I think, targeting hype culture. So for those who don't know, hype culture is kind of this thing that, I guess, like, it's more for millennials and Generation Z or Gen Z, or Zoomers as they're known, where basically there's limited edition goods that people wanna kind of like get, or quote unquote cop, and they pay a lot of money for this. So this includes like sneakers, you know, limited edition clothing, jumpers and tops and things like that, all these sorts of things. So that's what Zora is doing. They're kind of like bringing the physical world into the digital world and being able to trade these things. They weren't the first ones to do this. For those who know about Unisocks from Uniswap, they did this as well. But Zora kind of took it to the next level and are trying to bring on all these kind of artists and all these kind of people to sell their physical goods as digital goods and kind of capture the secondary market value of that. And I don't know if I'm going to go over it later, but Zora was also hosting RAC's Tape, for those who don't know. So that was basically a tape token that gave you a claim on a limited edition physical tape of RAC, like actual cassette tape of RAC's music, which was really cool as well. So that was a big kind of thing during 2020 as well. So Argent announced in March that they raised a $12 million Series A, which was huge at the time. Like, I remember reading about this and was like, wow, $12 million Series A round. That's massive for Argent, right? Because you see a lot of, I guess, like crypto projects raising money, but not a lot of them raise $12 million. They tend to raise like $1 to maybe $4 million. I guess those are seed rounds, so it's a bit different. But still, this was a massive raise at the time, and it was led by Paradigm, who are famous for their Uniswap investment, famous for a lot of the work they do around with optimism on optimistic rollups and things like that. They also had backing from Robert Leshner of Compound, of course, and a bunch of existing investors joined as well. I think Argent also had a really great year in 2020. They're trying to bring crypto, Ethereum, DeFi to the mainstream, I guess, to people who don't want to use MetaMask, don't want to use like these other complex wallets. They just want a seamless experience. They basically want like a fintech Venmo experience within Ethereum. And that's what Argent's trying to give them. So yeah, they announced that in March of 2020. Uniswap had a massive year, and I think my camera is blocking it here. So because the website's basically aligned on the left here, but basically you can see here, and I'll talk to it. Uniswap V2. There was an overview given by Hayden Adams in March of 2020. I spoke a lot about Uniswap's kind of growth in the Daily Grade newsletter yesterday, so if you want to check that out, you can. Links in the description. But basically, they kind of went over what Uniswap's V2 is going to be, how it's going to work, what improvements it brings, kind of things like that. I don't think it went live in March of 2020. I think this was just like kind of an announcement post about it. Yeah, so the launch details were here. So they were going to do a test net, and they're optimistic that V2 was going to go live Q2 of 2020, which it did. But yeah, so this was really exciting at the time because Uniswap V1 was still quite small, but it was growing. You can see the chart here. My camera's not blocking it now, so you can see the chart here that it basically was kind of like slowly in 2019 growing, and then it just like kind of had a breakout up into early 2020, and then obviously we've all seen the growth that Uniswap has had throughout 2020. It's just like dwarfed this growth, but that was in part due to V2 as well, because it brought more flexibility to the protocol, brought more features and stuff like that. So yeah. So UMA went live March in 2020 with their priceless synthetic tokens. So this was basically a way to basically create synthetic tokens without oracles on the Ethereum network, and basically tracking anything essentially. So the synthetic protocols, I think Synthetics is obviously the biggest one right now, but UMA is coming to give them a run for their money. There's other ones coming as well out, like a bunch of other platforms. I won't go through them all now, but UMA kind of went live. They wanted to give people exposure to kind of things like the S&P 500 that didn't require an Oracle feed, which I think Synthetics does require because they use Chainlink oracles. So this was kind of like their moat here, or I guess their competitive advantage. But yeah, this was released to testnet. They said, they basically gave an idea of what you could do and everything like that. And I'm actually thinking about it now. I'm noticing a trend that a lot of this stuff that we now use on mainnet, right, went on the testnet in Q1 and Q2 of 2020. So it's really cool to see that the whole ecosystem is kind of like, going on testnet at the same time and then going to mainnet, right? And we're kind of like moving forward as one collective kind of like whole rather than kind of disparate parties. So yeah, that's really cool to see. So Coinbase Wallet integrating DeFi apps in March of 2020 was big news at the time. So they basically allowed you to enter into DeFi apps like Compound and DYDX directly from the Coinbase Wallet. Now, I think this was the first instance of centralized finance or CeFi building on top of DeFi and getting involved with it. And I've spoken about this before, but I think that that's going to be a big narrative going into 2021. Centralized players tapping into DeFi's vast liquidity, right? Vast user base, all the advantages that come with it for their customer base. So that's going to be big. But yeah, Coinbase definitely kicked it off in March of 2020 with these integrations here. Just a few clicks and you could get involved. Very similar to how Argent Wallet works, but obviously Coinbase has a much bigger user base than Argent at this time. So that was quite big news in March of 2020. Big news outside of Ethereum in April was Binance confirming a CoinMarketCap acquisition. This was huge at the time. They spent, I think, I don't know if the actual dollar amounts were disclosed. Oh yeah, no. It wasn't disclosed like publicly, but the sources that the block went to basically said that at the time the acquisition was worth $400 million paid out in BNB and cash. That was a lot for CoinMarketCap, but at the same time, CoinMarketCap was still very dominant at the time. It's where everyone went to view kind of like the rankings of the different coins and stuff like that, information about different coins. CoinGecko was still very small. I think CoinGecko had a really amazing 2020 where they actually ended up flipping CoinMarketCap after this acquisition. But yeah, so this was huge news at the time. And Binance, I mean, I feel like they kind of squandered this acquisition. They didn't do as much with it as I thought they would. They obviously kind of like improved the website a bit and kind of plastered Binance stuff everywhere. But at the same time, they allowed CoinGecko to gain on them. And I might be a little bit biased here, but I think CoinGecko is a much better platform than CoinMarketCap. Just from like a data point of view, like CoinGecko pioneered the fact that you could see like fully diluted market cap versus circulating market cap. You could see where the tokens were basically going to be released, right? Which wallets they were sitting in from team and investors and stuff. You could actually see a lot more markets as well, like decentralized exchange markets too on there. So yeah, I feel like Binance squandered this. And, I actually was more bullish on this acquisition at the time. I figured that this was going to be huge for Binance because CoinMarketCap was like a retail funnel where a lot of retail investors went to, but it doesn't seem to have happened that way. So Balancer went live in April of 2020. So for, I guess like at the time, the only AMMs that were live were Uniswap and then I think Curve as well. But in terms of like non-stablecoin AMMs, it was Uniswap. And then Balancer went live and they basically brought a few different things to the table. They allowed you to do 8 different tokens within a pool rather than just 2 that Uniswap had. They offered, I think, did their BAL token go live here? I don't think so. I think it went live later. But they basically offered an alternative to Uniswap in that you could use 8 different tokens instead of 2. You could do, I think, smart order routing, which is basically optimizing across pools. That's what Uniswap did in V2, I think. I'm not sure about V1, but they definitely have it in V2, obviously. And then you could set custom fees as well, whereas Uniswap's fee is flat at 0.3%. You could set anywhere from, like, I think, no fee or maybe like a very small fee to 5% or something like that. Something crazy, maybe even higher than that. I don't even think there's a limit on the fee. I'm not sure, but yeah, they brought some new things to the table. So yeah, Balancer, April, man, it doesn't feel like it's been that long. I feel like Balance is newer than that, but maybe that's because they launched the BAL token later. But yeah, that went live in April of 2020. So Reddit actually ended up getting involved with Ethereum. So this news came out in April as well. So it's basically the title here, the headline here is Reddit may use Ethereum for a new token-based point system. And this was this hadn't gone live yet, and it actually did end up going live later. But this was basically Reddit saying that they're experimenting with a points and perks system on Ethereum's blockchain. It all went live later as part of like Moon Crypto and like Bricks as well, for those who remember this. But basically, yeah, at the time, this was just like an announcement this was coming, which I thought was really cool. At the time, there was speculation as well. It was like, how is Reddit going to do this? Ethereum can't handle the scale, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then there's actually news that came out that Reddit hosted a scaling competition for Ethereum, which I'll go over a bit later. But yeah, so this was really cool at the time. People got really excited about this. Whenever whenever an existing big platform like Reddit gets involved with Ethereum, people are like, wow, there's going to be so many new users coming in. And that is exciting. But at the same time, it's often overestimated how fast this adoption will happen. People are like, 1 million Reddit users are going to come onto Ethereum instantly. It's just not how it works, right? It takes time. It starts off slow. It might go exponential at one point, but it doesn't go exponential for quite a while, I think. So yeah, really cool to see Reddit announcing that in April 2020. I'll go over kind of what they launched a bit later. So the DeFi Alliance was announced in April of 2020, I think. So is it the DeFi Alliance? Yeah, so it was basically Vault Capital, Jump Capital, CMT Trading, and DRW Trading, which are all these, I guess, centralized kind of institutions or traditional finance institutions, launched the Chicago DeFi Alliance, which basically brings Chicago-based trading firms and DeFi projects together. Since then, the DeFi Alliance has been growing quite rapidly, I think. They basically want to bring in traditional finance systems players into the DeFi space, whether that be traders or like, brokers or I guess like different firms and things like that. And basically being able to bring in more liquidity to the space as well. And I don't know the numbers on it, but I think they have played a big role in DeFi this year. in terms of providing liquidity, getting involved with yield farming, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was really cool to see as well. Whoop. Let's refresh this. So Prylabs did a lot of test nets this year for ETH2, or sorry, in 2020 for ETH2, and one of them was basically the Topaz network. This was the first one that represented the full Ethereum 2.0 Phase 0 mainnet configuration, and this went live in April of 2020 as well. This was a bit premature because, as some of you know, the Phase 0 kind of mainnet configuration changed over the next few months. But this was really, really awesome because this was the first time that it went live with a full mainnet configuration. This was getting a lot of people hyped up. I think there were more testnets that went live after this. There definitely was more. Madasha was obviously the one that most people knew about, but Topaz was an early one, and it kind of like represented the first. I think once Topaz went live, people were like, okay, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel now. We can see the beacon chain. We can see Phase 0. We can see that it's going to happen this year. So that's why everyone got really excited about this testnet. So Black Thursday happened in March. I think, that was a really big deal for the wider crypto space. Obviously, all the prices dumped of all the crypto, right? But none other than MakerDAO was actually the most affected by it within DeFi. So what ended up happening on Black Thursday was that gas prices spiked so high that MakerDAO's oracles didn't update in time. So what ended up happening was that someone was able to bid on the collateral with $0 bids, basically, to liquidate people. And they got, I think, like $4 million worth of ETH or something for $0, or worth of collateral for $0. Which meant that the system became under-collateralized, which meant that MKR needed to be printed to recollateralize the system, and that ended up happening, and that ended up going quite well, actually. But then, of course, there were class action lawsuit lobbied against Maker for $28 million for the losses spurred by people affected by this. I don't know the current status of this. I don't know if it was thrown out or if it's still ongoing or whatever. But yeah, $28 million was quite a hit there. Maker still went on to have a really amazing year in 2020, but the MKR token has not. It has basically stayed around the same price versus US dollars. It has fallen a lot versus ETH. So this was a big hit for Maker, but at the same time, they seem to be growing still, right? People still seem to trust the system. I think they've made a lot of improvements since this kind of thing happened in May. So yeah, they definitely bounced back from this, but at the same time, there's a lot of damage there. People still remember it. People still know what happened. So I'm hoping that Maker has a better 2021. In terms of, like, I guess the price of the MKR token, because that represents a lot of confidence in these systems, I guess, whether we like it to or not. All right, next we have Gnosis Protocol. So Gnosis announced, I guess, like the Gnosis Protocol in April of 2020. It was the result of 2 years of research and development. And basically what the Gnosis Protocol is, it's a fully permissionless decentralized exchange protocol that enables a new mechanism called ring trades to maximize liquidity. Now, I think I want to call out here that this is fully permissionless, fully decentralized exchange, like completely decentralized. Even the front end, it's just available via Mesa, which is on, I think, IPFS. And any updates to even the front end needs to be done through the on-chain voting process. So that was really, really cool to see. Completely permissionless, completely decentralized. Ring trades were basically enable people to put in their bids, and it all settles at like a fair price, so that there's no like FOMO and things like that. It does kind of batch auctions. It allows you to trade in between, potentially any pair without having to worry about liquidity. So that was launched. I think Mesa had a pretty good year in terms of like adoption. There was a few ICOs or kind of coin offerings run on it as well. But yeah, that went live in April of 2020. So here we go. Compound governance finally went live in April of 2020 as well. So basically the governance process, I guess, like at this point wasn't like the comp token hadn't launched, but the governance process had launched. There was a bunch of comp allocated to, or at least delegated to, protocol politicians. So like people within the ecosystem that was being used to do like a V1 of the compound governance process here. But the token wasn't live just yet, I think. I think that, you know, people speculated on how the token was going to be released, but we didn't actually know that it would be released through a yield farming program just yet. But yeah, this was like the first, I guess, iteration of Compound Governance, which went live in April of 2020. And 0x launched their Matcha platform in April of 2020 as well. So what Matcha is, it's basically like, you know, 1inch or Dex.ag, basically a decentralized exchange aggregator that looks really awesome. I actually love Matcha's design. I think it reminds me of like Robinhood in terms of like the traditional finance system. So this went live, and they've actually done like a lot of trading. 0x volume started picking up because it went through kind of like 0x for a lot of trades and for liquidity and things like that. But yeah, this was quite big at the time. I've used Matcha before. It's really great. Sometimes they'll cover your gas fees. I don't know if they do it lately, but they did it back then, like when they first launched and over the first few months within 2020. So yeah, it was great to see Matcha go live then. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, Consensus did end up laying off more staff. And they did this because I guess they cited the impact of the coronavirus pandemic as well. I think that, I mean, as I said, it's got a lot to do with ETH's price. So ETH's price actually started trending up in Q1 of 2020, but then the coronavirus uncertainty hit and ETH dumped to like $90 again in March, and then it had a slow recovery through April. But at that point, I'm sure, you know, Joe Lubin was like, okay, I need to cut more staff. I can't afford this. You know, I don't know if the ETH price is going to go back up. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. You know, no one thought that ETH was going to go and have like such an amazing year amid all this kind of like uncertainty in the world. So yeah, we saw another layoff of Consensus there. Another 14% of staff, unfortunately, laid off in April. So here we have FutureSwap. So FutureSwap was only live for a short amount of time on Ethereum before they actually went back into, I guess, building out. So they went live as like a beta platform. I think they did like a couple of different tests where they did this in April, and then later on they did another one where they said that you'd be able to get their token if you had provided liquidity. So what basically FutureSwap is a perpetual futures market that lets you basically trade with like up to 20 times leverage. I think that they're going to have even more leverage when they go live. I think they're going live this year, but they were basically testing it, and they did like a very, I think a very safe launch where they limited what people could do. They didn't just put it out there and say, you know, put $1 billion in our protocol. They actually put caps on how much could go in. So that was really cool to see as well. But yeah, they're not live right now. None of their kind of like things are live right now, but they will be, I think, early this year in 2021. But we'll have to see how that plays out. So this was actually pretty big news at the time. So Coinbase basically said that they were introducing a price oracle for DeFi. So they were signing their price feed from Coinbase for, I think it was ETH or something like that, or like a bunch of other tokens. So yeah, they were doing it for Bitcoin and ETH USD markets, and they were signing this so that it could be used within DeFi. And what ended up happening was that Compound ended up using it. They ended up using the DAI Oracle, which for those who probably are aware, that ended up actually biting them because it ended up happening where Coinbase, the DAI price spiked, and then it spiked on Compound, and then all this stuff happened. But yeah, at the time it was quite cool because it was just Coinbase getting more involved with DeFi, right? They had already gotten involved with their Coinbase mobile wallet app, where they basically allowed people to get integrations with Compound and DYDX and things like that. And now they were signing a price oracle, which is kind of like the next step. So I thought that was really cool. More Telegram news. So basically, as I said at the start, the SEC went after Telegram for their ICO, and then eventually Telegram ended up caving to US regulators. They delayed the launch of their blockchain, which still hasn't gone live as far as I know, and they offered to return $1.2 billion to investors of the $1.7 billion that had been raised. Now, as I mentioned before, Telegram has been just, you know, drama upon drama, regulators, you know, delays, everything on their blockchain platform. So yeah, I'm not surprised to see that they haven't gone live yet. I mean, they mentioned here that they're pushing their go live date to April 2021. maybe they do it. Maybe they get it live. You know, they've got like 4 more months to get it live in 2021. Or maybe the regulators come after them again and say, no, you can't go live. I don't know. It's going to be messy. We'll see how it goes throughout 2021. So also in April, Gnosis introduced apps into Gnosis Safe. So for those who don't know, Gnosis Safe is basically a multi-sig wallet that launched quite a while ago. And now that and in April of 2020, they integrated apps. So what apps is basically DeFi apps that you can use through Gnosis Safe, through the multi-sig wallet to do a bunch of different things. I've used it a lot because Eric and I manage the ETH hub address through Gnosis Safe, and they've been adding apps all the time. It's really, really cool. I think that, you know, the future for a lot of, treasuries are going to be through Gnosis Safe. They're going to manage their multi-sigs through this. Everyone because Ethereum doesn't have like a native multi-sig, everyone uses Gnosis Safe as far as I know. And obviously we saw that, you know, Parity multi-sig, the other one, got hacked and then got frozen and no one wanted to use Parity's multi-sig anymore. So Gnosis kind of stepped up and built out Gnosis Safe, which is the most secure multi-sig on Ethereum. It holds like hundreds of millions of dollars, if not maybe $1 billion at this stage. I don't think it's there yet, but yeah, very, very secure multi-sig wallet. So Zapify was introduced in May of 2020. So you guys might have thought that Zapify has been around for a while and has as another kind of incantation called DeFi Zap and DeFi Snap. But Zapify itself went live in May of 2020. And disclosure here, I'm an investor in Zapify. Just want to get that out there. But basically, DeFi Zap and DeFi Snap, they existed as standalone products for a while. So DeFi Zap was basically the concept of zapping into different opportunities on Ethereum. So being able to enter into a liquidity provider position very quickly on Ethereum, on like Uniswap and things like that. And DeFi Snap was like a portfolio manager. So they kind of merged to become Zapify, which is a portfolio manager and viewer and everything like that, and to allow you to zap into different opportunities as well. So they had a few stats here that, you know, they launched their beta in December of DeFi Zap, and it had processed $13 million of kind of like deployment into DeFi. Since then, actually, since May, it's gone up to $1 billion now for 2020. So they ended up processing $1 billion after this merger. They had only 1,500 unique users at the time. I think they put out their yearly review and they ended up having like 300,000 unique users or something like that. So their growth has just been incredible through 2020. You know, I mean, it's one of the reasons I invested in them, right? And I use them all the time. They had a great DeFi summer. But yeah, they only went live in May of 2020. So they basically launched at the right time, because in June we saw Comp go live, which I'll talk about. But yeah, that was really, really cool to see. So Immutable X was introduced by Immutable, the company behind Gods Unchained, which was basically and it is live now, but it's basically a non-custodial exchange in partnership with Starkware. So basically a DEX running on Starkware's ZK rollup technology to basically be a DEX for NFTs like Gods Unchained cards, and I think they're going to be integrating with other projects as well. But this was a big deal at the time. As I've said a lot in the newsletter, on the refuels, 2020 was the year of layer 2 getting to mainnet, getting I guess like on testnets and on mainnet, going past the research phase and going into the development stage. And I think 2021 is going to be the adoption stage, and I think Immutable X is going to be one of the apps at the forefront of that. And as I said, Synthetics, as I said about Layer 2, it was getting Layer 2 to mainnet. So Synthetics Exchange announced their Layer 2 demo is now live with the Optimistic Virtual Machine, which is made by Optimism on their Optimistic Rollup technology. So this was basically a way to demo this scaling technology. And I think that it lasted for a short amount of time, or maybe it's still ongoing. I think it is still ongoing on the test net. It allows you to basically use the synthetic exchange on a layer 2, feel the power of it, feel how fast it is. And this was like there was a trading competition as well where people could basically trade on there and win like a lot of SNX. I think 10,000 SNX at $8 is worth like $80,000. Like first place got more than that. So there was some really great prizes basically offered for this. But I remember this. I played around with it. I'm not a good trader, so I obviously didn't win any prizes. But I played around with it and it was just instant, right? Like you just confirm trade and just instant. That was really cool. And this was the first demo. Actually, yeah, this is the first demo. There's a second one that I'll talk about a bit later with the synthetic staking, but this was for the synthetic exchange, which I think the mainnet is going live on January 15th. That's the target date this year, 2021. So we're going to get so much adoption happening in 2021 for layer 2s. It's going to be insane. So here we go. Yield. So for those who don't know, Yield is a company that's going to be bringing fixed term, fixed rate lending and interest rate markets to DeFi. So they, I guess they went live recently, but they were announced in May of 2020. I think they raised money from Paradigm as well, and they brought on Dan Robinson, who originally published the paper, to help them with these sorts of things. So they basically announced this, in May of 2020, and I think they went live recently. I think I'll cover that soon. But yeah, this was just another DeFi app that went live that a lot of people got excited about, because finally, we're bringing a yield curve to DeFi, which is missing right now, to DeFi stablecoins as well, to make sure that we have like a yield curve that we can reference, that different DeFi platforms can reference and things like that. All right, so as I was talking about before, Reddit announced that they were looking into an Ethereum-based kind of token platform, and they launched it in May of 2020. So they launched 2 tokens, one named Moons and the other Bricks, and it was issued to members of the subreddits cryptocurrency and Fortnite, which is very interesting at the time. And then Reddit was calling them community points, basically. So this was like an experiment that Reddit did. People were very, very excited about this at the time. They basically we're excited because you could actually wrap these and trade them as well, like on Uniswap and things like that. Just like you could like donuts. If people remember from 2019, Ethereum Donuts became tradable because someone tokenized it. But I think Reddit took this to the next level and basically did native integrations with cryptocurrency subreddit and the Fortnite subreddit. And it was cool to see that they did it with Fortnite, because that was like a whole new user base, right? That was a whole new set of people that had never gotten exposed to cryptocurrency before, getting exposed through Ethereum. So this was huge news at the time, and it was really cool to see at the time. So, and then later on, Reddit announced something even cooler, which I'll get to soon, the kind of scaling competition that they did, which I'll talk to soon as well. So ErisX announced the launch of the first US Ether futures contracts. Now, I said at the beginning that the CFTC chairman said that we'd see Ether futures coming live within 6 to 12 months from January. I think that what he meant by that was, I mean, yes, ErisX is a kind of like traditional finance platform, but they're not very big. The bigger platform is CME, and that's the one that announced the futures going live in February in 2021. But still, I had forgotten about this, ErisX, that they had actually launched the first US Ether futures contracts. But I don't think there's been much volume here as compared to CME. I think it's been quite small. But yeah, that went live in May of 2020. So yeah, I guess like the CFTC chairman was right about his prediction of 6 to 12 months. He was actually off by a month in terms of like he was too pessimistic. He should have been more optimistic. But as I said, ErisX is not as anywhere near as big as CME. So I guess like that's what everyone's looking forward to right now, is like the CME kind of launch. So Argent V1 was introduced in May of 2020, and basically introduced one-tap DeFi. So it allowed you to basically, tap into these protocols and enter into them very easily. No need to go through like complicated, I guess, MetaMask transactions and complicated transactions with the different protocols. You could literally just hit like Aave or Compound or the DAI savings rate and just enter into them with a couple of clicks. I mean, it says it's one tap, but it's more than one tap. But basically, it's nowhere near as complicated as doing it with MetaMask or like a Ledger or whatever. You just do it from your phone. It feels very similar to like a Venmo or a Robinhood or something like that. So I thought that was really, really cool at the time. I think since then, Argent, I don't know if they've released V2 yet. I don't think so. But I think they're working on it. So yeah, really cool to see that go live in 2020. So the first ETH2 deposit Launchpad, I guess like all of you who have used ETH2 and gotten into ETH2 staking will have used the Launchpad. So in May of 2020, the first mock-up of the Launchpad was kind of posted by DeepWorks Studio. This looks very different to the one that we have now. But basically, very similar concepts. I think that we replaced these graphics over on the left here with like the Rhino that everyone knows about. I think the colors were replaced. But yeah, this was the first version of it. And that got a lot of people excited because just another thing that made ETH2 feel very real, right? It felt like it was coming. It was close. The light was there. So yeah, this was announced in May of 2020. And then obviously it was iterated on, and we have the final product that looks a lot more like this screenshot here than it does the above ones. But that's what design, that's what design is. We go through the different iterations over many months, and we get to a place where we think that users are going to really appreciate it. And I think a lot of people did appreciate the Launchpad. It was very easy to use. It was like people's gateway into ETH2, basically. So Tornado Cash in May of 2020 did their trusted setup, which was bigger than Aztec's one. So we had Aztec's being the biggest, early 2020, and then Tornado Cash came along and was even bigger. And I participated in this one as well. They had over 1,000 contributors that participated to basically make this the most decentralized trusted setup ceremony in the world. 664 remained anonymous, which was really, really cool. The ceremony ran for 10 days, which was shorter than Aztec's. I think Aztec's ran for 30 days. But I think this also showed the growth of like kind of Ethereum in general, right? We had Aztec having, I think it was like a few hundred contributors, and then we have over 1,000 with Tornado now. But I think Tornado's setup was actually easier than Aztec's as well. Like the barrier to entry was lower for one reason or another. But yeah, the Tornado Cash hasn't been around for very long. May of 2020 was when they did this. I don't think they had gone live at this point. I think they went live later. But yeah, really cool to see that. So in May of 2020, TBTC, so tokenized BTC, actually ended up being deployed to the mainnet. For those who, this is the first deployment. So for those who know, what ended up happening like 2 or 3 days later, there was a critical bug found and they took the system offline. I think, maybe he mentions it here. No, this was just like the mainnet launch. Basically, yeah. And then 2 to 3 days later, it kind of had to go offline because there was a critical bug, and then it got relaunched. But this was the first decentralized, I think, tokenized BTC that went live. Maybe Ren Protocol went live sooner with their Ren BTC. But basically, up until this point, wrapped Bitcoin had dominated the space, and it still dominates the space. But people were excited about this because they're like, we want a decentralized BTC on Ethereum. And that's what TBTC hopes to offer. But yeah, they went live, went offline 2 to 3 days later, went live again later, which I may cover a little bit later. So Mariano he used to work at MakerDAO for a long time, actually. He kind of left recently, but basically Sai ended up being successfully shut down. So single collateral DAI in May 13th of 2020. So that's it. Like that single collateral DAI system was shut down because Maker moved to multi-collateral DAI, which I think I've forgotten to go over. So yeah, they moved to multi-collateral DAI. No, they did it in 2019. That's why I haven't got it on 2020 recap. I remember this. Multi-collateral DAI went live end of 2019 and was like obviously growing within 2020. And then they shut down single collateral DAI in May of 2020. Here we go. Uniswap v2 protocol got deployed to mainnet. So as I said, they announced it earlier and then they deployed it to mainnet in May of 2019, which brought with it a host of new upgrades. You could easily migrate your liquidity across. There was a new, an updated interface for Uniswap. You could do ERC20 to ERC20 pairs, so you no longer had to use ETH for the pair. You could use Uniswap as a price oracle. There were flash swaps now, updated documentation. Basically, this was like Uniswap launched this, and then after this, they just went crazy with growth. We all know about Uniswap's growth. I won't go over it again. I've talked about it a lot lately. But yeah, V2 went live May of 2020. Maybe V3 goes live May of 2021. I don't know if we have to wait that long. I think V3 is a lot closer than people think. So Starkware basically put together this blog post saying that they could scale Reddit's community points with StarkX. And basically what they did was they took their ZK rollup technology and trustlessly onboarded to the Ethereum mainnet the 1.3 million user accounts that had balances of the Bricks and Moons tokens from Fortnite BR, the subreddit there. And they did this, basically, the price per transfer was only 600 gas, which is extremely cheap on Ethereum. They did it over a 12-hour period while using only 2.5% of the Ethereum network, and they paid gas prices that were on average 30% below the average block gas price during that time. So this was a demo, basically, for them to onboard the entire Fortnite Battle Royale subreddit onto Ethereum and to show Reddit that we can already scale their community point system using the existing technology that we had. I thought that was really, really awesome that they did this. I mean, at the time, people were really excited about this. They're like, okay, wow, scaling is already here. And it was. As I've said, I've said it so many times, 2020 is the year of getting scaling to mainnet, 2021's adoption. I'm curious to see if Ethereum gets adopted by Reddit through their scaling technologies in 2021 as well. I mentioned MStable before, how they announced that in February of 2020, they went live on mainnet in May of 2020, basically allowing people to mint MUSD, swap in and out of stablecoins, earn a yield on their stablecoins through the save feature, and that's been chugging along quite nicely since they went live in May of 2020. Defcon 2021 was announced in May of 2020. Now, obviously, the 2020 Defcon was cancelled, unfortunately, because of coronavirus. I don't remember if there was a location kind of announced for 2020. I don't remember now. But basically, 2021 is going to be in Colombia, basically. Where is it? In Bogota, in Colombia. I don't know if this is going to go ahead, to be honest. The world is still kind of, tackling coronavirus. I know it's January. I know we have vaccines coming and things like that. But I don't know if I'm going to even be able to go to this. Like, the borders are still closed in Australia. I can't even leave my state at the moment, let alone the country. So I don't know if I'm going to be... I probably won't. Like, I'll be honest, I probably won't be there. Maybe it'll still go ahead and maybe people will be able to go. But I think it's going to be a DevCon that if the coronavirus pandemic continues as it has been, and with the disruptions that it's causing, I don't think it's going to be a very big DevCon, which is sad because I know that Colombia is a very beautiful country. But it's also... People were also like, this is weird, right? Colombia, obviously has a reputation for drug cartels and everything, right? High crime. I think that's kind of like over exaggerated, but at the same time, people are like, going to Colombia, all these crypto people together, are we going to get kidnapped, right? Is our kind of ledgers going to get stolen? Is our crypto going to get stolen? I think that's over exaggerated, but I wish I could go. I don't think I'm going to be able to go, to be honest, right? The Australian government isn't expecting to open the borders until at least mid-year, and I think it's going to be even later than that. Even with vaccines and things like that, we're not going to have vaccines till, my age group, probably till the end of the year or something like that. I don't know what's going to happen with this. I feel like it's not going to be as big as the other DevCons. If it goes ahead, maybe it'll end up getting cancelled. I'm not sure, but we'll have to keep an eye on that one. But still cool that they announced this, and people were very optimistic about it. But yeah, as we approach kind of like the date, which is in like, what date is it? I don't remember. I don't think they announced the date at this time. Yeah. But basically, yeah, they announced that and people were like a bit iffy and ahhing about it because it was May, right? The pandemic was still raging. It's still raging now, but it was like raging more in May of 2020. So yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that one. So the OMG network went live basically in June of 2020 this year after 3 years of development. So OMG used to be called Omise Go, for those who don't know. They basically brought this network to mainnet, claiming to reduce costs by 66%. This was quite a big deal at the time because obviously the project had been around for quite a while and people were like, where is it? Are they going to ship it? And they did. They shipped it. And they actually ended up partnering with USDT as well, which I think I'll go into, to basically put USDT on the OMG network. So yeah, that was just another scaling solution that went live within 2020. So also in June of 2020, I launched the Daily Gwei. So I launched the Daily Gwei newsletter. The very first edition went live on June 6th, I think it was. And this started off as just like a personal project for me to educate people. You can see the logo there is different. As actually, I changed the logo a couple of days later, but that was like the original logo at the time. But basically there was no YouTube channel. It was just the newsletter. There was no Discord or anything like that or Twitter account. I just launched this as a side project at the time, and I'm happy to say that since then I've written a Daily Grey newsletter piece every single weekday. I haven't missed one weekday since then, so I'm pretty proud of that. But yeah, for those who want to know, didn't know the history, that's basically when I launched it in June. So it's been 6 months so far, and it's been really great so far, and all of your support has been great. So yeah. Another layer 2 scaling solution that went live was Diversify's decentralized exchange using Starks or using StarkX is now on mainnet. Basically, that's been, I guess, like an order book exchange, kind of like Loopring's exchange is. But yeah, this went live a bit later. For those who don't know, Diversify is basically, I think it was a Bitfinex project. And then it kind of like spun out and became like its own kind of thing where it's been doing a lot of layer 2 scaling solution, a lot of layer 2 things. So yeah, they went live in June of 2020 as well. And of course, another layer 2, Loopring Pay, went live. Basically enabling very cheap and instant transfers on the Loopring Pay kind of network, using the same technology that they used for their Loopring exchange. But basically this was payments use case, payments, instantaneous payments, for free, with the same security guarantees as Ethereum. So that was another big deal there, which is really, really cool to see. Loopring has been very big within the layer 2 space in 2020. They've been leading the charge. They've been the pioneers here. And I think in 2021, they're going to basically, the fruits of their labor is going to become apparent, because they're just so far ahead of the game at this point, in terms of building, dexes and payment kind of apps on layer 2, that they're going to be a big winner through 2021, I believe. So yeah, really cool to see that going live within 2020, and I'm curious to see what else they do in 2021. I'm very excited. All right, next up we have the Onix Test Net from Prylabs. So this was another, I guess, ETH2 Phase 0 test net that came out after the Topaz one that I just spoke about before. It was, I guess, there's a few months between the two test nets, and this one, Onix, was, I guess, the second last one that they did. Single client, I think, as well, still, which is really, really cool. So yeah, this was just another test net. I guess as 2020 was the year of ETH2, there was a lot of test nets actually, not just within Prylabs, but also the other teams had their own test nets. There was like, test nets that lived for a few days, some for a few months. There was a lot of testing that went into ETH2. For those who obviously, I guess, were around, were running these things, you knew kind of like what the process was. Each time it was like restart the network, get these new clients running. And yeah, it says here, Topaz wasn't multi-client ready, whereas Onix was. So I think Onix ended up being compatible between Sigma Prime's Lighthouse and Prismatic Labs' Prism and things like that. So yeah, that was just another network, another test network for the Phase 0 beacon chain in June of 2020. So I alluded to this before. I spoke about how Reddit did their community point system, and they announced that they'd be doing that on Ethereum and things like that. They had the Moons tokens and the Bricks tokens. And then, just a couple months later, in June, they basically announced that they're going to be hosting a Great Reddit Scaling Bake-Off. And what this is basically a competition for different scaling teams to come in and show their kind of like scaling solution and how they can scale Reddit's community point system. I showed you just before that Starkware already kind of jumped the gun here and did a demo already. A bunch of other teams submitted results here. I think the result, where are the results? Here we go. So yeah, the submissions came in. There was basically everyone, every kind of scaling solution, and some other networks chimed in and kind of submitted their solutions here. You had Starkware obviously came in first. There's Matic, OMG Network, basically all the scaling teams, or at least most of them, kind of had a go at this, which I thought was really cool. So yeah, this was big news, right? The fact that Reddit was not only supporting Ethereum through this community point system, but also supporting it through the this scaling bake-off. Unfortunately, I haven't heard anything about this lately, actually, since the submissions rolled in and everything. So hopefully they're going to put out an update soon, because it was a very big deal at the time. So yeah, that happened in June of 2020 as well. Next up, we have ZK Sync from the Matter Labs. Now, for those of you who have used Gitcoin over the past 2 rounds and used their scaling solution, they're using ZK Sync. So you've already used it, and it's basically based on zero knowledge rollup technology. It lets you do really, really fast and instant payments, very cheap fees as well, and it works really well for Gitcoin. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you used it because of the cost savings, donating to Gitcoin grants during high gas price times. Actually, depending on how many grants you donate to, can end up costing $50 to $100 or something like that. Whereas if you use ZK Sync, kind of once you're set up with it, it's much cheaper. I think 80 or 90% cheaper. So yeah, they released this in June of 2020 as well, and then obviously became one of the most used layer 2 solutions given their Gitcoin integration, which I thought was really cool. So Compound Protocol announced Comp in June of 2020. I think this was pretty much like one of the biggest pieces of news of the year because of the fact that it kicked off the yield farming craze, right? They announced Comp and then they said that all users, whether they're lending or borrowing, are going to accrue comp tokens to their account. And this kicked off the yield farming craze. People were, doing things in spreadsheets, calculating how much they could yield, how they could hack it, and everything. And then we had all the kind of like, I guess like it took a little bit, but then we ended up having other kind of projects come along, which I'll talk about later, of course, that kind of brought us through to, I guess, like September, October, when it went really crazy. But yeah, so I would say June 16th, 2020 was like the time that yield farming and liquidity mining became kind of popularized, whereas synthetics actually pioneered it. I would say that, they started doing their synthetic staking kind of program where they paid SNX tokens out to stakers in April of 2019. I would say that they were the pioneers here. And there are other networks that have done it too. But I would argue that synthetics pioneered this model and actually made it succeed, whereas Compound kind of popularized it to the point where basically everyone knew about it, right? Yield farming just became this massive meme. I remember being on Twitter, everyone was talking about it. Everyone was talking about and making memes about yield farming and everything. So that's what kicked it off. And we had like a crazy few months after that, that's for sure, which I'm sure I'll get to in one of these many updates up here. So this report came out in June of 2020 as well about PayPal and Venmo are planning to let users buy and sell crypto. And as we all know, towards the end of the year, PayPal, enabled crypto purchases for US citizens of buying and selling, which was a huge deal. But the rumors started swirling, in June of 2020. And people just kind of, I guess, forgot about it when they announced again that they were going to be supporting it and actually kind of like adding it to their platform. So people got really excited. But yeah, it was reported earlier in the year in June of 2020. Axie Infinity had a great year actually last year besides this update. So they obviously launched their token as well later in the year, but what they introduced in June was a scaling solution, so called Ronin. Now, Ronin is a bit different to ZK rollups and optimistic rollups in that it is a side chain to Ethereum, so it is not secured by Ethereum. But I think what they want to do is they want to basically get it to a point where it can be a layer 2 solution on Ethereum, not just a side chain. But yeah, so they introduced this because I think NFTs got priced out of the network for DeFi use cases. It became really expensive to do anything with NFTs. So we obviously have Ronin, we have Immutable X, which I just spoke about before from Immutable, the people making gods unchained. And yeah, this was just another scaling solution that kind of came out. This actually recently went live on a test net or mainnet, I think, as well. So there is progress being made here for sure. So also this is in July actually of 2020, Center, I guess like one of the main parties behind USDC, ended up blacklisting an address holding USDC for the first time. This was very big news at the time, because there's always this kind of discussion around, centralized versus decentralized stablecoins. Many people aren't aware that any of these centralized coins, whether it be USDC or wrapped Bitcoin or things like that, usually have a backdoor in there where the admin, or at least the issuer, can basically blacklist your address, right? Or basically, stop you from being able to spend your funds. Now, they obviously don't want to do this unless they're forced to, and they were forced to by law enforcement to do this. I think it was due to either money laundering or terrorist kind of related activity that they got kind of a law enforcement action from. But yeah, this was big news because I don't think many people realized at the time that Circle Coinbase kind of had this power to blacklist people as addresses when holding USDC. And it's not something that most people need to worry about, I think. But at the same time, it speaks to why we do still need a decentralized stablecoin, right? DAI is great. It unfortunately suffers from losing its peg more often than not, but it's a very, very great kind of alternative. At the same time, it's also consisting of 40% USDC at the moment. So, that could be blacklisted for whatever reason, and then DAI would obviously lose its peg majorly because most of its collateral, 40% of its collateral would be blacklisted. So there's all this stuff kind of happening in that kind of world. And there's a bunch of other stablecoins now trying to, be the one truly scalable and decentralized stablecoin. And I think we need to get there because we can't rely on these centralized solutions forever. We can't rely on centralized tokenized, Bitcoin or stablecoins or things like that, because inevitably those are the choke points where regulators are going to go after. It's all well and good that we create this like super cool DeFi system where the apps are fully decentralized like Uniswap, but if we're still just handling the assets that are centralized and they dominate, like Tether still dominates, for example, in the stablecoin space, then we're really not, DeFi, right? Like DeFi works because of the assets and the liquidity. If you can choke those by going after the centralized players, then it kind of kills the golden goose essentially. So we definitely want to make sure that we kind of get off these centralized solutions and onto the more decentralized ones. But yeah, I think since July, since Senate kind of did this, the community's more aware of it now, which is great. But at the same time, USDC growth is still going like really high, and I'm actually really glad about that. But at the same time, I would like to see less reliance on these centralized stablecoins. YFI. So we had Comp launch in June. Then we had YFI launch in July. So if Comp started the fire in, the yield farming kind of craze / fire in June, YFI threw like a ton of gasoline on it and just caused a massive explosion, because we all know what happened, right? I mean, anyone who was around back then knows how explosive this release was. Andre basically went from basically unknown in most of the community to being like the person in DeFi, right? The DeFi god, because he released this token. It was capped, right? It was 30,000 tokens ever. You could farm it with a bunch of other tokens. There was no VC allocation. There was no team allocation, no insiders, nothing. It was quote unquote fair launch. And the community just like latched onto this, right? People bought like a lot of YFI, while it was sitting at around the $1,000 mark. And things like that, a lot of people ended up, quitting their jobs because they got rich off the pump of this and everything. And it kind of started. It kind of like continued the yield farming craze and kind of took it to the next level, basically with YEarn. So yeah, that launched in July, and that kind of, I think, June. I remember when Comp launched, I messaged one of my friends. I'm like, dude, like this really feels like super bullish right now. Like up until that point, the market was kind of hot. Like ETH and BTC were recovering, but it wasn't like things were exploding or anything like that. And I remember messaging my friend when Compound launched and said, "This is crazy. This is going to go nuts. We're going to have like another bull market here because of this." And sure enough, we did. And then when YFI came out, I said to my friend, like, we have to buy this, right? We have to buy as much as we can of this. This is crazy. This is insane. Like, and it was, right? And one thing I didn't foresee was how quickly it would expire, all right, or how quickly we would play it out, because we basically went from, non-existent kind of like yield farming in June to yield farming being absolutely everything by July, August, to all these tokens kind of going up rapidly in price into September. And then we had like the massive come down through October, November, still December to an extent, right? And then, we started seeing ETH and BTC trend up again. But yeah, YFI is definitely one of the biggest stories of the year, I think, right next to Comp, simply because of the fact that it launched something new, right? It launched this kind of like fair launch movement where people were like forking things and saying we're fair launch or doing that. Like, there's a lot of scams as well, right? But at the same time, I think, the biggest news of the year is always something that comes out of nowhere and no one kind of foresees. And no one saw yield farming coming. Absolutely no one saw it coming, that I know of anyway. Maybe there were people that I haven't spoken to, but everyone that I spoke to and everyone that I am kind of like, speak to day to day, no one saw that coming at all. They all knew DeFi would grow, but they didn't know kind of like that this thing would come out, yield farming, and basically supercharge DeFi's growth in 2020. So yeah, and this wasn't just the token, right? You know, YFI, YEarn came out with a bunch of products, right? You could do like yield farming with them, you know, deposit your funds, yield farm through other things, you know, the vaults and everything like that, which became really popular. And there was a bunch of other features here. And then, you know, kind of like every week after this, or every few days after this, Andre kept shipping, right? And people were like, how's this guy shipping so fast? You know, we all know how that ended in the end. It was, he was shipping fast because he wasn't exactly testing these things, right? Test in prod became a meme and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, so that was definitely one of the highlights of 2020. So I spoke about the Launchpad before, at least the first version that was showcased. The official one went live July 27 of 2020. So this was basically the final product. And I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You've all seen it. You've all played around with it, I'm sure. But this was basically a guide on how it was going to work, you know, and getting people ready to basically run for mainnet. I think mainnet was expected earlier than December 2020, but there was a few delays due to various things. But the fact is that we got these ready, you know, way earlier than we needed to, which was really, really cool. So yeah, that came out in July. So also in July, at the end of July, Argonomics. There was an Argonomics update. So Arve basically announced that they were going to do a token swap and supercharge their token. So go from the ETH token to the new Arve token. And they would basically add all these new features to it that would make it a lot more valuable, a lot more, give it a lot more utility. Such as being able to stake it, being able to participate in governance, things like that. There's just like so many features that they added that basically made Aave one of the best DeFi tokens, I think. So yeah, and as I said, like Aave's been around as ETHLend since 2017. They originally did this ICO. You know, a lot of people kind of wrote them off, and then they kind of had a renaissance in 2020 where they just, you know, shot to the #1 spot, I guess, or close to the top of the DeFi leaderboard. So yeah, really cool. And this went through recently, I think, last 2 or 3 months or something like that, which is great because Aave just continued to grow, which is really awesome. Augur V2 went live 4 months ago, so I guess that's August. So Augur V1 was, I guess, like out for a while. There was a lot of people criticizing it because it was you could only kind of bet on things or make markets with ETH. You couldn't use like stable coins, so it kind of limited the platform a lot in terms of like what people would want to do. You know, that you don't want to basically make a prediction market with ETH and then, you know, the ETH price changes so much that you end up it was better off you just holding the ETH than kind of betting in these markets with it. So that's one of the big features that came with V2. They also did a token swap from rep to rep V2 as well. And there was a bunch of, obviously, token addresses here and everything, or contract addresses here and everything. But yeah, that went live in August of 2020. So more PayPal kind of news here from Cointelegraph in July. So this was kind of like widely reported, and then it kind of was reported that there was a Paxos partnership going on as well. So that ended up coming true. So Paxos is the kind of exchange or provider that, or the broker, I guess you could say, that is helping PayPal to offer these services to their customers. So yeah, I guess these rumors swirled for a while, and people, as I said, people seem to have forgotten at the time. But yeah, we got that out there now. So Set V2 was introduced in August of 2020. This was a pretty big evolution of Set and Set Protocol. It was basically going to be rolled out in phases where it's adding multi-asset support, yield farming support, you know, gas cost savings, all these things like this, set portfolios like what you see with the DeFi Pulse Index and things like that, and a bunch of other things. Some of this stuff's still not out yet, like flexible trade execution and enhanced protocol integrations, but they're being worked on right now. I mean, obviously I work at Set, so I'm across all this sort of stuff. But yeah, that was announced in August, and that's been the biggest upgrade for Set Protocol ever. Basically, the work that the team has put in has been really, really great to get to this stage, and it's been great to see it evolve over the last few months. So Dark Forest was announced on August 2nd, 2020. So you've probably seen Dark Forest lately, the, I guess, zero knowledge space warfare game, as I like to call it, where you can basically create like an army of planets, capture planets, capture other people's planets, destroy planets, all these sort of things. And it was officially announced in August of last year. Since then, they've kind of been making constant improvements to it and doing different beta editions where they were letting people in, with keys, with beta keys and things like that. So it's become very popular lately, I think. I had a few of you DM me the other day when I said that I had some keys, and they went very quickly. I haven't been able to get any more keys, unfortunately. But yeah, this is really cool because I think that, this is running on the XDAI network and using zero knowledge proofs as part of the game mechanics. But I think this is really cool because we need more of these kind of like, I guess, really, I wouldn't call them like technical games or anything, but like just take crypto gaming to the next level. Like we've had games like Gods Unchained, Axie Infinity and stuff that are great, but I think they're very similar to what we already have, where obviously Gods Unchained is like Hearthstone, Axie Infinity is kind of like Pokemon or something like that, right? Whereas at Dark Forest was like a real-time strategy game, and it actually was like, very unique and got people really hooked. There's a few people on my timeline on Twitter that I see tweeting about it all the time, and they're very hooked on this right now. So yeah, this first came out in August. I think hopefully this year they do like a full release. I think that'll be really cool. It's still a little bit clunky, I think, using XDAI. Maybe they'll use a different network or a different layer 2 solution to scale it some more, but that's how they've been able to do it on Ethereum, basically doing it on the XDAI sidechain. There's no way you can do this on the Ethereum mainnet. It would be too expensive. All right, so as I said, comp in June, right? YFI in July. Comp starts the fire. YFI chucks a ton of gasoline on it. I think YAM was like YAM did put gas on it, put explosives on it, basically made yield farming enter, I guess, not just the Ethereum consciousness, but like the wider crypto space consciousness. For a few days, YAM was literally all that anyone talked about. Literally. It was basically this protocol that was going to kind of rebase, the YAM token was going to rebase, and part of that rebase would go to a treasury, and then the YAM token holders would vote on what that treasury did, or where those funds went, or how it was managed. And the way you could earn these YAM tokens were that you could use like all the DeFi tokens like SNX and I think Link and things like that. Here, MKR, YFI, Comp, Lend, which is now Aave. And, the APYs at the time were very high. I think the protocol ended up reaching $1 billion in total value locked or something. People were, printing a lot of money off this sort of stuff. But this is what really kind of, I think YFI, kicked it off, and this continued the party, after like, and it's funny that it happened basically a month after each other, Comp, YFI, YAM. And then from there, after YAM, we had all the food Ponzi's, right? And all the forks that were just like literally copycats and copycats upon copycats upon copycats. And that's why we had the crash so fast. I mentioned before how I was surprised at how fast this crashed. And now, when you really think about it, the fact that there was just so many clones so quickly, in hindsight, it was obvious that it was going to come crashing down. And some people called the top to their credit. But a lot of people didn't. And a lot of people got wrecked. But, YFI ended up going from... it started at $0, but it hung around most of its life at like $1,000, $2,000. But it went from that to like 45,000, and then it dropped to like 7,000 in like 2 months. And after the mania, and now it's back up to I think 22,000 or something like that. And YAM's market cap went crazy, and then it came back down, and it's like at a $10 million market cap right now or something. So it was it was a crazy time. Anyone who experienced this, during these months as well, like I was in a stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne due to coronavirus, which means I couldn't leave my house for anything but essential services. So I literally just threw myself into this, and it was crazy. I kind of like neglected my health a bit, and neglected my sleep a bit, and I think a lot of people did. But out of this came, a lot of people that made a lot of money, and they started giving back. Gitcoin started seeing a lot of much more money thrown at it for the matching rounds, for the grants and things like that. So as much as I think that these things went very crazy, I think they were a net positive for the ecosystem, because now we have DeFi that grew so much, and DeFi's growth didn't go away. it grew in part, a major part, to the fact that yield farming came along, and yield farming's still around. The APYs are way less lucrative, but yield farming's still there, and we're still, finding new ways to kind of harness it, to do, fair launches, to distribute tokens and things like that. So yeah, I definitely think that Comp, YFI, and Yam are to credit for basically causing the explosive DeFi mania that we had, and basically growing DeFi to where it is, kind of today. Oh yeah, and then I guess I've got this up here because I wanted to talk about the fact that, Yam launched, but then there's a lot more to it, right? Yam launched, and then there was a bug found where in the rebasing mechanism, so it needed saving. Then it turns out that Yam couldn't be saved because the code couldn't be changed or whatever, because the governance didn't work. Then there was a post-rescue attempt. Then there was a migration plan announced where you would go to V2 and then V3. And then Yam set up a Gitcoin grant and raised over 100,000 DAI for audits and things like that. And that all happened in about 3 days. So that was quite crazy. And for those of you who are wondering where I'm getting all these updates from, I actually curate a newsletter for ETHub each week called the ETHub Weekly. And you can find that at ethub.substack.com. And that basically has all these updates. That's where I've got this all from. I went through every newsletter, 52 newsletters from last year, picked out all the best bits, and that's what I'm showcasing to you right now. But that goes out every week, every Monday. So Aave V2 was announced in August of 2020. Aave had, as I said, I've said it too many times right now, Aave had a spectacular year in 2020. They had their V1 go live, the tokenomics update, now V2 they announced in August, where they were adding a bunch of different features here. So I'll go through them soon because they went live, and I'll talk about more about the features there. But they added a bunch of new features here, and they went, I think there was only 3 or 4 months where they announced and then they launched, which was really, really cool. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. So another thing that happened during DeFi Mania, shortly after Yam, I think, was Curve's token launch. And Curve's token launch was very funny because what ended up happening was the tokens were the contracts, the smart contracts for their kind of token and their governance system were available on GitHub, which means anyone could launch it or deploy it to the Ethereum mainnet. And what ended up happening was some anonymous person called 0xC4AD on Twitter. They basically launched it for Curve, and it was out there. And their last tweet, what a ride! So they basically put it out there. And then it was available, right? And Curve's market cap, fully diluted market cap, ended up being I don't know, 200 billion or something briefly, and then it Curve went to $50, and then it came crashing down because that was only because there was a little bit of supply, so it's under $1 now, but that was huge. I think at the time there was a bunch of token kind of releases people were anticipating, and Curve's was one of them. And I think Curve delivered. They launched at the exact right time as well, August 14th. That was the heat of the DeFi market. That was coming off. Yeah, I remember, we had Yam, and then people were after the Yam fiasco finished in 3 days, okay, can we take a break now? And then a few hours later, Curve happened, and then people are oh my god, stop. Which was quite funny at the time. So yeah, that went live, went crazy. You could farm it, same shebang that happened. All the exchanges kind of listed it really quickly. You can see here that Evan was looking at the fully diluted valuation at the time and stuff like that. And then people speculating that the Curve Finance launch is a legal maneuver, so that if they can say that a community member launched it, they can claim that they were sufficiently decentralized from inception, all this sort of stuff. Maybe they can. I haven't seen anything more about that since then. But yeah, that was another major launch in August of 2020. Oh, I'm going to have to refresh this here. I think this is the Tether integration with OMG network. Captures. God, I'm not going to bother with this. Basically, what this was is basically OMG network adopted Tether, USDT on there to do more scaling and things like that on the OMG network. And I don't think there's been much adoption of that lately, but it was pretty big news because USDT or Tether went on there and was able to be sent across the network, and that was, I think, the first major asset that was on there, basically. But yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on that. I think that's going to grow more this year. It just needs more integrations to continue. Another big news out of Aave, again, I know I've been talking about Aave so much, and it's just because there's just so much stuff that happened with them, but they basically were granted an electronic money institution license by the UK Financial Conduct Authority, which is a very big deal. It means that their business entity, so not the protocol, their business entity, Aave Limited, was issued this license, which means that they could do a bunch of different things within the traditional finance system, kind of using Aave, and the team could basically allow the Aave ecosystem to access payment accounts and onboard kind of new users into DeFi. So this was huge, right? This is just more, I guess, the traditional finance system bleeding into DeFi. And for those, I mean, I use these terms a lot, and for those who don't know the difference, when I'm saying kind of like traditional finance, I'm talking about like the traditional system, like the existing banks, the existing financial solutions that deal with fiat mainly, right? When I say centralized exchanges and solutions, I'm more referencing the crypto centralized things like Coinbase, Bitstamp, Bitfinex, all those kind of solutions. And then when I say DeFi, obviously I'm referencing all the apps on Ethereum. So that's kind of like the spectrum there. So, Aave's already got integrations with centralized exchanges. So this is just like bridging it out again into the traditional finance system, which is where we need to tap into if we want to keep growing these things. So it was really great to see Aave get granted this license. All right, next up, we had another big piece of news during the DeFi craze, which was Sushi Swap. Now, this was quite big, right? Quite a big tale to be told here. So this launched in September of 2020. As I said, each month here just had like one major announcement that was just absolutely insane. But basically, Sushi Swap was, they claim to be an evolution of Uniswap with Sushi Tokenomics, aka they claim to be a fair launch version of Uniswap, where there was like no VCs and the community could get the tokens and things like that. So that was, I mean, for those of you around, none of what I'm going to say is going to be new to you, but I'll just give the TLDR for those who weren't. So what ended up happening was that SushiSwap launched. They allowed you to farm SushiSwap tokens with Uniswap liquidity provider tokens, and then after a period of time, they were going to use those liquidity provider tokens to migrate the liquidity to SushiSwap, which was a fork of Uniswap. That ended up happening. There was a few $100 million worth of liquidity taken. I think it was 800 million taken from Uniswap into SushiSwap through the migration. And during all this time, there was a lot of drama, right, between Uniswap versus SushiSwap. Chef Nomi, the original creator, ended up like kind of exit scamming by selling the dev sushi amounts, but then he paid it back, and then he kind of disappeared, and the community kind of took over, and it's been growing ever since, and things like that. But this was, this lasted about a week, and a lot of these things happened really fast, but yeah, it lasted about a week. Ended up, I guess, vampire attacking Uniswap's liquidity. And then, as you all know, after that, like shortly after that, Uniswap launched their token, which I'll go into in a bit. But this was huge at the time, and I think this marked kind of like I think the Uni launch marked like the end of the mania there, but SushiSwap was like the last good yield farm, I would say, in terms of like the amount of yield you could get from providing liquidity. It wasn't like an outright like copycat. They were actually building things. I mean, I know it was like a straight up fork of Uniswap initially, but they ended up building things, and now they're like flourishing. They've got a whole unique ecosystem within the SushiSwap project. But yeah, so that was quite big at the time, and it divided the community. It was a lot of drama surrounding this, right? You had like, I don't know, like it was just insane at the time, and I think that since then Uniswap and SushiSwap are coexisting, and they're doing their own thing, which I think is very healthy in the end. Oh, SushiSwap there as well. So yeah, so this was actually launched before SushiSwap from Uniswap Protocol in August. I think the order got messed up a little bit there, but basically what this was is that Uniswap released token lists, which when you go to Uniswap now, you can pick a token list to choose from, to choose tokens from. And this was done because there are a lot of scams around where you would input like a token name or like a token address, and it would say that it's called this, right? Like it's, say you wanted to trade like Link, and it would say, okay, this is Link, but it wasn't really Link. It was a scam token, and people were getting scammed a lot. So Uniswap ended up coming out with this token list feature, which I guess seems to alleviate the problem a little bit, but also made it worse, I guess, in the fact that when you want to add custom tokens, it keeps resetting it every time. But that was a pretty, I guess, like big addition at the time, because this was in the heart of like the Ponzi's, right, and the food Ponzi's and the DeFi yield farming mania. So obviously there were a lot of new tokens, and they were all using Uniswap for their liquidity. So yeah, it was great to see Uniswap release this. MetaMask Mobile came out in September 2020 as well, on Android and iOS. Obviously, everyone has probably used MetaMask at this point on desktop. Their mobile client, I don't know if it's as popular as their desktop client, but it syncs with it. I mean, I'm not a mobile wallet user, so I don't actually have much of a view here, but I have used it before and it works well. But yeah, so that released in September of 2020 and to complement their desktop offering. Barnbridge was another kind of hyped up, I guess, like product / yield farm that launched in September, where you could input like your stablecoin liquidity and farm bond tokens. I think the hype for this only lasted a week or so because of the fact that the price dropped so fast after the first rewards were paid out. Yield farming was kind of like old news at this point. People were basically like over it, I guess you could say. Because there was diminishing returns to it. But Barnbridge, what it is, it's basically a tokenized risk protocol. And I don't think their actual product is out yet. They're just doing their yield farming in order to distribute their token. But their product's coming out soon. Some of you may have seen Saffron Finance as well, which is another product like this. But this was kind of like a big kind of news at the time when they launched this, and they launched a liquidity mining program, and people were pretty excited about that. So the DeFi Pulse Index was launched on token sets back in September as well. For those of you who don't know, the DeFi Pulse Index is an index that consists of the most popular DeFi tokens, such as YFI, SNX, Aave, all those sorts of things. That was launched in September. It's got like a $25 million market cap right now. It's growing pretty well. We really believe, like Ed said, that indexes are going to be a big product going forward. People just want diversified and passive exposure to a lot of these things. So I think that that's going to be a big kind of narrative going forward. But yeah, this was launched in partnership with DeFi Pulse with Set. DeFi Pulse basically did the methodology for it. They created the whole thing, like how it will be weighted and stuff like that, what tokens would be included. And there was actually, you can see here, the original allocation here, there was, Wi-Fi was first. Now, Wi-Fi isn't first anymore. I think SNX or Aave is first right now. But you can see the circulating market caps at the time and the token price. This was back when, at the high, I think this launched just as like the DeFi market was about to cool off and crash. And since then, rep has been removed from the basket as well in there. But yeah, that's been growing quite steadily, which has been really cool to see. As I said before, ZK Sync went live and they were integrated in with Gitcoin during round 8 and round 7. And I mean, I explained before how all of you have experienced this and experienced the benefits of ZK Sync, so I'm not going to go into it again, but really cool to see that Gitcoin pioneered a layer 2 solution here. All right, this I think marked the beginning of the end of yield farming / DeFi mania, was the introduction of Uni. I mean, I know I've said that I thought other things were the biggest things that happened in the year, but it's kind of hard to say. I think in terms of like broad, I mean, I guess you could say in terms of like broad exposure, awareness, how much noise was created about this, how much of the community outside of Ethereum heard about this. I think Uni was the thing. So the Uni token was the thing of 2020 that got everyone talking about kind of like, I guess, like everything Ethereum, everything Uniswap, everything DeFi, simply because they did the best airdrop that anyone has ever done. They gave 400 Uni tokens to everyone who had interacted with Uniswap at least once. Even if they had failed a transaction on Uniswap, they got 400 Uni tokens. Now, obviously, a lot of people use multiple addresses, so they got like multiple 400 allotments of Uni tokens, which meant that I think over 100,000 addresses ended up claiming Uni or something like that. It was crazy. And then on top of that, they also paid out Uni tokens to liquidity providers. And the earlier that you provided liquidity, the more tokens that you got. Now, some of the top liquidity providers from like the start got like millions of dollars worth of uni, which is insane, right? Imagine getting that, right? Imagine sitting there and being like, oh, I was an early liquidity provider, going on the Uniswap website and seeing that you can claim millions of dollars worth of uni just for being an early user of the product. That was insane. And that was like a really great story at the time. And still is. I think it really shows that, you know, there's been other airdrops like this, but it shows what you can do for users, for your early users of your protocol. And what I actually thought was hilarious was that they took the snapshot for the uni airdrop, I think only a couple days after SushiSwap kind of launched, so that everyone who was providing liquidity on Uniswap to use to farm sushi actually didn't get any tokens for that. I got like a very minimal amount of tokens for that, which I thought was sneaky but good. And I actually, on that note, I actually think that the Uni token wasn't going to launch in September. I think it was going to launch later, but SushiSwap kind of forced their hand here. You know, and Uni also came with a liquidity mining program that lasted for, I think, a couple months or something like that, where you could farm a bunch of different pools here. You can see ETH USDT, like ETH stablecoin basically, and ETH WBTC, and that basically shot up Uniswap's liquidity. And it was kind of funny because then after the liquidity mining ended, SushiSwap did another vampire attack where they redid their liquidity mining and took liquidity from Uniswap once Uni farming ended as well. So there's been a bit of that going on back and forth, but yeah, I think the Uni token launch was the thing that defined DeFi in 2020 for sure. I know I said that about the other things, but now that I think about it in terms of the reach that it had, it has to be Uni. It has to be the Uni launch. So Optimism put out another update in the September of 2020, basically saying the light at the end of the tunnel. Now I used this as well. I used this term earlier on in the video where I said that all the layer 2 teams saw the light at the end of the tunnel here in terms of like, we're going to get this to mainnet, you know, we're going to get this to testnet then mainnet really quickly, and we see like how we're going to scale Ethereum. And that's what this post is all about. You can see the TLDR here. You know, this was their testnet rollout plans, their early adopters, and their path towards mainnet. So basically what they did was they did an synthetics integration with their staking interface where you could basically use Optimism to stake for people. I mean, because the gas fees were so expensive, smaller stakers were kind of priced out, and this was for them, basically. And you can see that here under sudo mainnet and then open to public. I think these things are going live, the sudo mainnet and open to public, like very soon, next couple weeks. And yeah, I mean, they also put Uni here as well and Chainlink. So they've only announced their synthetic integration so far, and they've just been teasing their Uniswap integration. Chainlink as well, they're teasing. So I'm curious to see how that goes here. But yeah, really great post from them. This gave people a lot of optimism, pun intended, about layer 2, I think, because people, I think, are still sleeping on this. I said it on Twitter the other day. People are going to be blown away by what we deliver this year and how much adoption layer 2 gives in 2021. The first state of EIP 1559 update went live, I think, what was it, 2 months? So September, October in 2020. EIP 1559 had a big year towards the end of the year. For those who don't know, there was a Gitcoin grant for EIP 1559 that ended up raising over $150,000. Tim Byko, one of the ETH1 core developers or core kind of coordinators, joined the effort and is kind of leading the charge here. And he puts out these updates. I think there's been like 6 updates at this point, which is amazing, right? For those who've been around for quite a while, there wasn't much updates around this. There wasn't anyone leading the charge here. We knew that we wanted it, and we know that we still want it, but we needed someone to step up, and Tim Byko did this, which is really cool to see. So yeah, 1559 had a really great year in 2020 as well. So TBTC went live again in September of 2020. So I mentioned how it went live, I think in June or something like that before. But yeah, it ended up going live again in September of 2020 where they fixed it. It was like fully audited and everything, and it's been running ever since. It hasn't, I think, sadly, it actually lost its first mover advantage to I mean, it didn't have a first mover advantage, but like there were no tokenized Bitcoin kind of implementations that were huge. But then, you know, TBTC, you know, kind of failed to launch the first time, which gave the opportunity to like wrapped Bitcoin to become the kind of Bitcoin that was used within DeFi during DeFi Summer. And then TBTC launched at the end of DeFi Summer and has not seen the adoption that I'm sure they would have hoped for, but it's still live, they're still growing, there's still a lot you can do with it, you can still use it and everything like that. So yeah, it's good to see that they went live again and didn't have another kind of bug there. October of 2020, Vitalik posts this Ethereum, I guess, magician's post called a roll-up-centric Ethereum roadmap. Now, this kind of changed the game with ETH1 and ETH2 and how we're going to be scaling when we go to ETH2. So what he means by this is it basically, he means that we should be using ZK rollups and optimistic rollups to scale Ethereum. We shouldn't have to worry about shards doing like cross-shard transactions and sharding breaking kind of composability and the money Legos we have within Ethereum. We should just use roll-up technology, layer 2 technology to scale Ethereum. And I spoke about this earlier about how we're going to use the shards as data availability layers. And that's what Vitalik kind of outlines here. And he also says that we can basically get to the point where we're basically phase 1 and done, which means that we ship phase 1 of the ETH2 roadmap, and then we can start using it, to do things, to do all the things we want to do. And then obviously the merger will go through the ETH1 to ETH2 merger, and then phase 2 might come along, later on, but it's not a critical roadmap item anymore. So this kind of like was like a very big paradigm shift in how we're going to be doing things with ETH2. People seem on board. I'm definitely on board with this. I didn't expect to see as much layer 2 kind of stuff that we saw in 2020, but it's good that we did because I think that this is the right path forward. So another big piece of news in October that was, I guess, not Ethereum related, but crypto related, was that the CFTC and the Department of Justice filed charges against the owners of BitMEX. So BitMEX is a giant, or was a giant, derivatives exchange. It had been around for quite a while, and it had a pretty eccentric CEO in Arthur Hayes. You've probably heard of him before, probably follow him on Twitter. So they charged him with, along with his co-founders Ben Deller and Samuel Reed. Now, I think Ben and Samuel have been arrested, but Arthur's still on the run. But basically what they charged them with is that they were, I guess, servicing kind of US customers without doing proper KYC procedures and things like that. I think there might have been some like anti-money laundering, and Bank Secrecy Act. So they were failing to report these things to the relevant authorities and stuff because they were servicing US customers. This is a pretty big deal. And the fact that Arthur Hayes still hasn't been arrested is quite insane. These are some serious charges. So the fact that he's running away from them and still on the run, as far as I know, is quite insane to me. But yeah, that was a huge piece of news in October. And I remember sitting at the time, Bitcoin was sitting at around $10,000. I can't remember what ETH was. I remember ETH was around, Bitcoin was around 10,000 because that's like the meme number, right? And I was watching the chart. I'm like, okay, is BTC going to dump now? Because BitMEX was a huge player, like very, very big player. And it really didn't. It had like a little bit of a dump, but it didn't really do much. And that's when I kind of thought to myself, I'm like, okay, the bull market's on. The bull market's definitely on. Like, this is a confirmation for me. Because if a major exchange it didn't go down, but if like the drama happens and, they basically people were scared that they couldn't withdraw their coins out or whatever. If that happens, I expected a kind of bigger dump, but that's just not what we saw. So yeah, that's just like a bit of an aside there of what I remember feeling at the time. John McAfee in October was also sued by the SEC for his ICO promotions, and he was arrested on US tax evasion charges. What's funny is it took so long for this to happen. For anyone who was around in 2017 and 2018, McAfee was a prolific ICO shiller or ICO promoter. He promoted basically everything. He got paid a lot of money to do this as well. It ended up coming out that he made more than $23.1 million to basically shill or promote these ICOs. And he was paid in both tokens and Ether and BTC. Everyone knew this was going on because he'd just shill, it was like McAfee's coin of the day or coin of the week at one point. And they would actually pump. And this was just super shady. And it took 3 years for the regulators to catch up here, which is quite insane. And it's also quite scary for projects who think they've gotten away with things because, I don't know what the statute of limitations is on a lot of this stuff. I doubt it's very short. I think it's quite long and sometimes it's unlimited. But yeah, so that happened in October. It was quite... I say funny because I thought it was going to happen much earlier, and the fact that it finally happened was, quite a funny thing to see finally. So MetaMask launched their swaps feature in October of 2020 as well. So for those who don't know, you can click into your MetaMask extension and you can see a swap feature there. This is basically a decentralized exchange aggregator. and a way for MetaMask to make money. Now, I actually traced what wallet MetaMask kind of takes the fees into, and they've made millions of dollars from this so far, which because they charge like a 0.8% fee, I think, on these swaps. So they've actually become a revenue generating business now, which is awesome. You know, MetaMask has been free for forever, and it's been funded out of consensus, but now they're actually generating revenue and have a proper business model. And this has led people to think about, are they going to launch a MetaMask token or a Mask token, and is it actually needed? I mean, I said the other day on Twitter that I think there's a near certainty that they launch one within the next 12 months. Maybe I'm wrong there. I just say that because I think that at this point, the fact that they're generating revenue, the fact that they want to I think they want to decentralize out, development, make it more of a community-owned thing. A token makes sense there, so we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, this was a pretty big feature when it was released in October of 2020. Another layer 2 kind of implementation here from Matter Labs. So Curve teamed up with Matter Labs to use ZK Sync, so you can do a basically, swap stablecoins on Curve on the L2 Test Net with ZK Sync. You can do this right now. Like, there's a live demo that you can go check out. It's at zksync.curve.fi, and you can go play around with that. I played around with it before. It's super fast. Like, it feels just amazing. It's not clunky like I guess the Ethereum 1 mainnet kind of is when you're doing a lot of things. It's very cheap. It's very very quick. Sorry, it's just great. So just another layer 2 implementation that went live in 2020. Again, Aztec. I spoke about Aztec earlier in the video. Basically, they rolled out their own layer 2 implementation on ZK rollups, where they're calling it privacy on layer 2 here. A bunch of different features you can see here, like 200 times gas reduction compared to Aztec 1.0. They dubbed this Aztec 2.0, which is their layer 2 network. And you can basically see a block explorer here. You can go to the demo and everything. So if I click through to the block explorer, I can see it here. What's going on here. I think that it's still on kind of like the Gorley test net, and I don't think there's much happening yet, or maybe they've changed test net since this was released. But basically, that was just yet again another layer 2 implementation that went live. I feel like I'm going to click through all these tabs now, and they're just going to be layer 2 implementations at this point. But as I said, like, so much layer 2 going live, now it's just time to adopt it, and I think that's what we're going to see in 2021. Something not layer 2 related. So the Index Co-op went live in October of 2020 as well. So this was launched by Set and DeFi Pulse, basically summoned by them. It's basically supposed to be a decentralized organization to manage index products. So the Index Co-op actually manages the DeFi Pulse index now. So under their management, allows them to basically do trustless rebalances, figure out basically whether to remove a token or not and things like that, or like give opinions on that. And the Index Co-op is also responsible for onboarding more index products under its umbrella. So not just the DeFi Pulse index, but anything new that can be onboarded, will be onboarded to the Index Co-op there. So I thought that was really, really cool announcement from that. And again, like, I work for Set, who summoned this, so a bit of disclosure there for all of you. Aave news again. I think this is like the 6th time I've mentioned Aave, but I just have to, because it's just they've done so many good things here. In October, they raised $25 million from a bunch of new investors. I guess they sold Aave tokens to them. They raised it from Blockchain Capital, Standard Crypto, and Blockchain.com Ventures, among others here, which was just, at the time, I was like, okay, $25 million is a huge raise, but it's Aave. Like, they're growing so quickly. I'm sure these investors were clamoring at the door, like, I want tokens, right? I want to invest. So just another thing out of Aave there. So I was alluding to it before. So Synthetic launched their second OVM L2 testnet with Optimism, I guess. So you could basically stake your SNX, and then you could, I guess. As I said, this was for the SNX stakers who were priced out of the Ethereum 1 mainnet. So you can stake it on their layer 2 implementation, and it's like fast and free and everything like that. It's not I don't think it's like a mainnet thing. I think it's still testnet. But yeah, this was basically a testnet SNX distribution going on here in October. And since then, I've been a part of it on one of my addresses. It's been quite cool, quite cool to use. It feels very smooth. I think it's very centralized at the moment though, but you know, as I said, still testnet phases and things like that. Another update out of Optimism here. So they basically teamed up with Coinbase Wallet. So Coinbase Wallet now supports Optimism. As I said, Coinbase has been super active in the DeFi space in 2020. They have contributed so many things. They're adopting all the bleeding edge tech. I thought this was just like a huge bit of news here. You know, obviously adoption is going to be slow on a lot of these things, I think. But the fact that you can still use optimistic Ethereum through Coinbase Wallet was huge. And I'm hoping to see Coinbase be even more active in 2021. Finally, the PayPal adopting crypto news was made official in October of 2020, where they announced that they will allow users to buy, hold, and sell crypto on their platform using Paxos in the back end. This was, I think, one of the biggest kind of crypto news, like outside of Ethereum, just crypto related news for the year. This is going to be bringing in, and has already been bringing in, a lot of new people into the ecosystem. Unfortunately, they only support a handful of tokens right now, like BTC, ETH, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin. Like, it's just weird. I can't wait for them to support actual kind of like tokens that do something, that are cash producing, like DeFi tokens and things like that. I think that's when it's going to really change the game. But yeah, this finally got announced in October of 2020. TokenSoft announced also in October that they were partnering with Anchorage to bring wrapped layer assets to Ethereum. So basically going beyond wrapped Bitcoin and launching things like wrapped Zcash as their first product here. I think there's been talk of wrapped Filecoin. Basically any asset that is not on Ethereum, you know, natively, because it's part of another blockchain, wrapping that asset and putting it on Ethereum. I think this is cool. I think this basically reinforces Ethereum's kind of use as this economic nexus that sits at the middle of all these other things. But at the same time, I don't know how much demand there is for anything outside of wrapped Bitcoin, right? You know, wrapped Zcash, I mean, I don't know. You know, Zcash is obviously probably got like a varied holder base, but I don't know how many people are going to be clamoring to get their Zcash onto Ethereum in order to use it as collateral in DeFi and things like that. I think, you know, even if you think about the privacy features that it might bring, you can wrap any token with Aztec's technology on Ethereum and make it a private privacy coin, essentially, to an extent. So yeah, I thought this was big news because it just reinforces Ethereum as like the asset settlement network, but I don't know how much demand there's going to be for anything except Bitcoin. I'll probably be proven wrong. Maybe I'm not thinking about like all the demand that there is, but maybe there are people who still actually want to hold these things long term. We'll see, I guess. We'll see what happens there. So November 4th, 2020 was the ETH2 announcement date. So the ETH2 date was announced on November 4th when it was going live. Phase 0 was going live on December 1st, 2020. The deposit contract was deployed. Everyone had a few weeks to get their ETH in by November 24th so that everyone basically could become part of like the Genesis set. So we needed to get to the minimum of 524,000 ETH deposited, and then we could kick off Genesis on December 1st, which ended up happening, which I'll talk about later in the video. So yeah, that was huge news. Obviously, everyone was like, you know, when's ETH2? When's ETH2? When's ETH2? And then finally, we had this update from Danny Ryan on November 4th, which is, you know, less than a month later. We had ETH2 live, which I'll talk about in a sec. Another V2 implementation, so ArbiSwap from Off-Chain Labs was a fork of Uniswap V2 onto an Arbitrum rollup. This is another kind of optimistic rollup implementation. Off-Chain Labs is building this. They basically, you know, you could use it basically if you clicked here, swap.arbitrum.io. It was really fast, and just another layer 2 implementation going on here within Ethereum. In November, we had, unfortunately, the, I guess, consensus bug with Geth and Infura. So what ended up happening was there was an update to Geth, the Geth Ethereum client, that fixed a critical consensus bug that was not exploited or anything until November 11th, 2020, when, funny enough, the Optimism team actually ended up exploiting this, not on purpose. I guess on purpose, but they weren't doing it as like a malicious thing. But what ended up happening was that Infura ended up going out of sync with the Ethereum mainnet because they were running an old Go Ethereum or Geth version of Ethereum from December 2019, which means that they fell out of sync with the Ethereum mainnet because of this. Now, I mean, this is a post that I wrote at the time called Infuriating, explaining basically exactly what happened from a technical standpoint, but this was not a great moment in Ethereum, unfortunately. It didn't mean that Ethereum was centralized or that it was dead or anything like that, but it did mean that we needed better disclosures from our core developers about these sorts of things. They did a good thing by fixing this consensus bug, but what they ended up doing was that they didn't tell anyone about it. They didn't even tell Infura about it, which they should have. And I think there was lessons learned there for sure. They put out a post-mortem here as well about it too. And there was a lot of discussion that kind of followed from here, which is quite cool to see. I think, yeah, as I said, I think they learned from that experience. November 2020, so October is when PayPal announced that they'd be doing the crypto services. In November, they basically opened it up to US users. So yeah, US users can now basically buy, sell, and trade crypto on PayPal's platform. Again, at the end of November, as I mentioned earlier in the video, DAI's price on Compound fluctuated. I think it went higher than $1, up to like $1.10, $1.20, which led to liquidations that shouldn't have happened. It was $88 million worth of liquidations on Compound that shouldn't have happened, but did happen because the DAI price was misreported because they weren't using multiple Oracle providers. They were just using, I think, Coinbase and Uniswap. And obviously Coinbase was the market. The DAI market on Coinbase spiked up to $1.30, which means that people were able to liquidate on Compound. So that was I think, you know, that brought up the topic of like oracles and oracles being a choke point and a centralization point on DeFi, right? I mean, obviously Chainlink is a big oracle provider, but rolling your own oracle seems to kind of lead to these kind of bugs or these exploits that happened. I mean, it's not even an exploit. I guess it's like an economic kind of bug here. I guess you'd call it like, no, you know what I'm going to call it? Unexpected economic behavior, because it wasn't a bug. You know, the system worked as it intended. It wasn't an exploit. It was just economic behavior that is not expected, right? No one expects DAI to spike to $1.30 and, you know, affect the rest of the DeFi market through an Oracle kind of I guess mismatch there. So yeah, that was kind of like got a lot of people talking, and you know, Compound was actually took a little bit of a hit for that, but they seem to have bounced back and are doing fine right now. So doesn't seem to have done any lasting damage there. Yearn, so Yearn started doing a lot of these mergers, which I spoke about in some of the Daily Grey refuels. They started merging with a bunch of different DeFi protocols, like Cream, SushiSwap, Cover, Pickle. I think there was a bunch of them, and you know, they were calling them mergers and stuff like that, but they weren't really mergers because the protocols still retained their tokens. They were more like partnerships, and I think that, you know, I think that they did this so that they could bring kind of like I guess like bring like people into the ecosystem of Yearn and bring like developers into the ecosystem and kind of like synergize between all these projects. So yeah, that was kind of like, people were like, you know, what's going on? This is weird. But you know, it seems to have worked. Like the whole ecosystem seems to be growing. You know, SushiSwap's doing very well right now. I think Yearn's getting ready to launch more V2 products. So yeah, it seems to have been a great decision there. So we hit the minimum that we needed on November 24th to launch ETH2. Preston Van Loon put out a tweet on November 25th saying ETH2's birthday will be the 1st of December at 12 p.m. UTC, which is when it was scheduled to be because we reached that minimum. I remember this time, if you were on Twitter, this was like, this was history that was made on November 24th when we hit that target. Everyone was watching it. It was a few hours before. We saw the ETH rolling in, you know, into the deposit contract, and people were like, are we going to make it? And we did. We overshot it, right? And it was just such an amazing celebration. The community came together in such an amazing way that for me was the highlight of the entire year. Like, my personal highlight was that. You know, ETH2's launch was cool and everything, but this was the highlight. The fact that we actually came together as a community to get this stuff done. That was just awesome at the time. So for all of those who experienced it, you know what I mean. For those who didn't, you know, that's what it kind of felt like. It felt like, years worth of work and research and development culminating in this thing that basically, was going live and everyone was celebrating, and we just did it. As a community, we did it, which was really cool to see. And then Genesis happened on December 1st, 2020. I wrote about it in the Daily Gwei here. The launch of ETH2 Phase 0 went off without a hitch. It was so perfect that even like every researcher and developer were like, wow, that was too perfect, right? It has been going perfect ever since. There's been no bugs or anything like that. I didn't mention it, but the Madasha test net, that was the longest running ETH2 test net that went live for a few months in 2020, ended up having like some critical issues, but the network rebounded from that. There were a lot of lessons learned, and that culminated in such an amazing ETH2 launch. So yeah, ETH2 has been chugging along. It's still going fine right now. There's been no critical issues with it. And hopefully we launch phase 1 this year, and we can kind of like get the merger done as well, maybe next year in 2022. And then we can finally get rid of proof of work, which people have been kind of like waiting for a very long time. Gitcoin Grants round 8 started in December as well. It was the biggest round. I think up to $1 million was kind of like given in matching funds, and then there was people kind of like donating as well across the round. It was the biggest by far, and this was basically the result of all the money that was made within DeFi. I think all the money that people made from DeFi tokens, from yield farming and everything like that. People kind of donated to the teams that they wanted to, gave back, the matching as well. Like, it was just awesome to see. So I can't wait to see what round 9's like now that, the prices are still going up, and, I'm sure people are making money still. So really interested to see what happens in round 9. Aave V2 went live in December. I swear, I think this is the last Aave update for this video. But yeah, Aave V2 went live in December of 2020. They brought with them a bunch of features, which I said I'd talk about. Like flash loans were upgraded, yield and collateral swap, which allowed you to basically swap out your collateral through using flash loans, I think. Flash liquidations, so liquidating using flash loans, batch flash loans, debt tokenization, so you can get your debt positions and tokenize them, and potentially use them in other DeFi protocols. Native credit delegation, basically allowing for under-collateralized loans. A bunch of gas optimizations, because Aave V1 was actually quite intensive on gas costs. So that was really cool to see. And stable and variable rate borrowing as well. And a bunch of audits as well were done. There were 5 audits done. So they're taking security very seriously here. But yeah, Aave, I said it before, had the biggest year in 2020, I think, in terms of like the amount of stuff that happened for them. So really great to see that. Visa partnered with Circle, the issuers of USDC, in December of 2020. They're going to be doing a bunch of stuff around there. They want to add USDC payments to Visa credit cards as well, which I thought was really cool. And this is huge news, right? Visa's huge. Everyone's always kind of referenced crypto transactions per second to Visa and things like that. And the fact that we're getting USDC, which lives on Ethereum, into Visa, and basically partnering with them and bringing them into the ecosystem is just another stepping stone on our way to bring traditional finance into Ethereum. CME Group announced Ethereum Ether futures on December 16th, 2020. A really great early Christmas present here. As I mentioned earlier, ErisX did their Ether futures earlier in the year, I think in June. CME Group is much bigger than them. CME Group or CME, the exchange, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, does a lot of volume for Bitcoin futures, which they launched in the end of 2017. So now they're launching these in February of 2021. Their second crypto futures product, which is Ether here. So people are obviously very excited about this. And as you can see here, this is the aggregate open interest of Bitcoin futures, and CME is in red, one of the biggest providers here. I think the biggest single provider of Bitcoin futures trading here. So the institutions are coming for Ether. Also in December, we had Nexus Mutual's founder Hugh Karp's wallet address getting hacked from a man-in-the-middle attack, and $8 million was drained from him. This was very unfortunate. Nexus Mutual was actually going through some pretty tough times before this as well, with the token price coming down pretty rapidly, and the project kind of like suffering from that. And then this kind of happened. I went over this in a Daily Gwei refill. I won't go into it now. I'm sure many of you have read about this, but yeah, this also happened in December, which was unfortunately not very good for Hugh here. Coinbase also announced in December that they have filed for IPO. So they're going to be IPOing in 2021. I think this is going to be the first big crypto IPO. This is going to bring in so many new people into crypto. It's insane. Coinbase is obviously the front door in the US for a lot of people into, ETH, BTC, and a bunch of other kind of tokens and things like that. So this is going to be huge. I think it's going to trade at over $100 billion market cap right out of the gates. Crypto's heating up, so people are going to be like, how do I get access to crypto or the broader space in my retirement account? I can do it with Coinbase shares now, or Coinbase equity, whereas you can only do it through Grayscale's products right now for Bitcoin and Ether, since there's not a Bitcoin ETF. So I think a lot of people are going to be lining up to kind of get their hands on Coinbase's equity here. The Graph network also went live in December of 2020. This was massive, right? I mean, they launched their network, they launched their token. Their token ended up trading at a ridiculous kind of price or valuation and things like that. Everyone kind of it's funny because a lot of people didn't know what Graph Network was beforehand, but they had actually been powering all of DeFi for a very long time. All the fancy numbers and front ends you see, all that stuff's kind of running through the Graph. And they launched their token, which went nuts. And people kind of started comparing it to Chainlink as middleware and things like that. So yeah, that was quite a big launch. And for those of you who were around for a couple of days, that token went absolutely crazy because it was listed on Coinbase. It ended up going insane. So yeah, that was a really cool launch to see. And the Graph, not just the token, but the product that they've been building for a couple of years now, I think, or maybe even longer than that, is an amazing product. Everyone that I've spoken to on the developer community loves working with it. So yeah, that was another big launch. Tornado Cash also announced their governance system / token in December of 2020 as well. So they are going to be doing a Torn token, which is going to be given to people who use Tornado Cash in the form of an airdrop. It's also going to be given to the governance system as well, team and investors, of course. The token's going to be used for liquidity mining and things like that, which within Tornado Cash. So that was just another, token launch, another big token launch in 2020. It wasn't the one that finished off the year though, which I'll go into in a sec. So Compound Protocol, they announced that they were going to be migrating to their own chain called Compound Chain, which was a kind of out of left field announcement for a lot of people. They're like, why are they building this? Why aren't they just working within the Ethereum Layer 2 ecosystem? And you can see here that they blocked people from replying to them because they knew this was an unpopular decision. So, I wrote about this in the Daily Gwei. I'm not a fan of this at all. I think it's a very short-sighted strategic decision. I think they're going to regret doing this. I think that they should have just stuck to Ethereum and worked within the Layer 2 ecosystem there and worked with other projects to do that. But maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Compound Chain. But yeah, that was another announcement that kind of got a lot of people talking in December. Also, about a week ago, the Haiku book was announced. I think I wrote about this or talked about it on the Daily Way Refuel the other day. So the Haiku book is basically a collection of haikus that were posted to the ETH Trader and ETH Finance daily threads over the years. And this was basically for anyone who was on Reddit and in those threads, you would have seen these. But yeah, so basically you can buy this book now at the haikubook.org, I think it is. And it's a really cool, I think, book that you can buy. Because it's got a really pretty art on the front of Ethereum art and things like that, and then inside it's got haikus, of course, and it's something you just put on your coffee table, and I think it's a conversation starter as well. So yeah, this was also kind of announced just towards the end of the year, basically. So we ended the year, the last two announcements here, the first one being with the SEC filing a lawsuit against Ripple and its two executives, alleging that the firm brought in over $1.3 billion in ongoing unregistered securities sales. This was one of the biggest pieces of news of the year, obviously. This ended up killing, a lot of the XRP price movement that we saw within the November, movement that was, people were attributing it to TikTok and people on there promoting it and things like that. But so that kind of happened. And then a lot of exchanges announced that they were delisting it, like Coinbase even announced that they're going to be delisting it in January of 2021. So yeah, this was just huge news at the time and a long time coming. A lot of people were like, this took way too long to happen. It was obvious that XRP was a security or an unregistered security and it was trading as an unregistered security. and that the co-founder and CEO are profiting amazingly from this, from selling this into the market, from selling XRP into the market. So yeah, that's still ongoing. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff happening with that this year, but I'll keep you guys updated in the Daily Grey Refill episode. All right, the last bit of news to end out the year here was 1inch token, launched on Christmas Eve, gifted to everyone who had interacted with the 1inch protocol, similar to Uniswap, of course. And, you know, I guess the market doesn't really like these tokens anymore because the 1inch token launched, and within the first few hours, it was trading at like a pretty good valuation. I think it was the same valuation as Uni. And then it kind of like dumped. It went from like $3, maybe it went up to, and now it went to under $1. Now it's back up over $1. But this was like, you know, kind of, everyone knew this token was coming, but they didn't think that it would be launched on Christmas. And it was kind of good to get a Christmas present here for those who, I guess, got some 1inch tokens and ended up selling it, or, you know, even if you're holding it, it's still worth a pretty penny now. But that's how we kind of like finished out the year, with the 1inch protocol launching, the 1inch token launching, the governance process launching, all this sort of stuff. So yeah, that was really cool to end out the year. I think the last few days there might have been some recaps put out from each of the projects, but no major announcements that I can remember coming out. But yeah, so I guess that basically ends 2020's recap. That is a very, very long video. I know it's going to be about probably like 2-3 hours long. If you've made it to the end here, kudos to you. You have basically gotten the most comprehensive, I think, recap of 2020 on Ethereum that you will get from anywhere. A lot happened, and there was a lot that I was missing from that. I ended up actually not including so many things that happened. And it was just too big of a year. And I think 2021 is going to be even crazier. So if you do want to keep up to date with basically every week, go to ethub.substack.com. It's where I basically put out, you know, an ETHub weekly newsletter, and I basically, you know, break down everything that's happened in the last week in Ethereum. And Eric, Connor, and I also record a weekly podcast at podcast.ethub.io that goes over the weekly newsletter. And of course, I have the Daily Grey Refill episodes going out every day now, but I know that, you know, that might be too frequent for some people. So definitely you can check out the weekly recaps instead. And yeah, if you're new here, subscribe to the YouTube channel, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the Daily Grey newsletter, join the Discord. And that's it for this year, for the 2020 recap, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you all on the next Daily Grey Refill. Thanks, everyone.